Good morning, everyone, and we're back at you, working on open source 3D internet so that we can turn the world into the full internet into the world's largest game. So right now I'm working on trying to improve the footprint of the actual program by making it as small as possible, loading as little as we need, doing last minute loading of what we need when we need it. That includes on a lot of my pages what I've done before when I first wrote it is I was creating these iframes that go back and get the information as you're working. And so what I've done is I've changed that now so that they dynamically create the iframes as you're going, creates the iframe, uses it, and then destroys it afterwards. So I'm in the process of seeking out everywhere that I used an iframe and converting them over to this function I wrote. In fact, let me find the function itself just so we can review here. That would be in the common page. Helps if I look in the right page, huh? Okay, it's in the common page. And what this function actually does is it looks inside of the iframes div, make sure that the div is there, which is my container that I'm using to package all of the iframes in it. Okay, so it's going to be put inside of this div that's hidden, and the class also puts it in a layer, z-index that's very, very low on the page so that it's always in the back of everything that we're doing. So hidden and far back. Then I create the iframe element, I give it a random string name. I want to make sure that it only gets submitted one time, so I set an actual value on there for submitted equals 0. Then when it loads the iframe, I check to see if it's submitted equals 0, which was a little loop thing that we ran into yesterday where the page just kept repeating on load. So to keep that from echoing and doing the function more than once, I had to make sure that we tested it to see if it's been done. So we load the page, we tell it to bring in this function, and of course the page source is afterwards. So we load in this function, we set it to within the onload part of the iframe so that it knows to run that function when it's done. Now what that allowed me to do was set the iPage, which is the content document from within the iframe. It brings that forward, and then I set it to the iframe to submitted so that we know once we've done whatever it has in there, it means it clicked the button or what have you, then it basically goes through, and right here we're calling the page source. So when the source comes through, it loads the page, runs it with the function, which will have some type of submit button or something. The submit happens and it gets rid of it afterwards. So if you created an iframe and you're not doing a submit, then you're not fully making that loop. It won't get rid of the iframe. So well, an easy way to track that would be you open up the in your browser, you check the section, you check the iframes div and see if there's any iframes left at the end of execution. So okay, so that function takes care of that, and as you can see, here's a sample of how we used it. I created a function called onload. I told it using the iPage that we're passing in here, which is that frame, the content document within the iframe. I tell it to set some values on that page using getElementById. I give it the values that I want to put there. I tell it to click a particular button, which will then cycle the page and submit it. Loads the page. Then here I'm calling that actual function above me, so that prepares the onload. Then I pass that onload and the different frame page that I'm actually using. So two parts here. We've got the source of the frame page, and then we have the function that we wanted to run when we do the onload. Okay, so what we're working on here is I'm searching through, making sure that I've created this same format on every one of the calls that go to any one of those iframe pages. Now there's a couple of them that I'm going to run into as I go that are being used by the plugins. We'll get to those later because I'm actually still designing the layout of plugins to make it as simple as possible for everybody to use. If I can do as much code of checking on my end, that means you'll be able to do as much as you need to on your end. As simple as possible. With as few lines of code, you'll be able to do it, and it'll run valid without any issues. So a good example would be on the onload, I want to make sure you're doing a click event so that you've actually submitted it so that it can destroy the iframe. So with that said, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look for iPage, because that's when I'm pretty much finding the different ones that haven't been set yet. The other thing I could search for actually is the content. If I search for where I'm setting the iPage equals content document, if I look for this on here, this will tell me every place I'm actually running an iframe. Okay, so starting position. Yeah, this is exactly where I left off, which is a good sign. And let's get that out of the way for a minute. Okay, so notice I said I use an iframe. I'm using the community iframe, and then I set some fields based on values, and eventually I save the position based on this. So notice that I'm also in this particular one, I'm using different frame pages for each one. So the easiest way to do that is to wrap it all into one, wrap 3 different calls to this function. Since I've simplified it, it actually, it's not that many more lines of code. It all works about the same either way. Okay, so what I want to do is right here, I've done a snippet of that code just so I can get the format exactly the same every time. Consistency is the easiest way to troubleshoot stuff. Okay, and then for each one of these, I'm going to the community iframe, which notice in our folders over here, we have the iframes directory. These are each one of the iframes that we're running in the core program. So community. Okay, so that takes care of that line of code, and that's part of the wrapped in thing. This is the next piece we need. We're going to put this in here. And what I'm going to do is take that out. I'm going to take the rest of this and all the way through the click function, and I'm going to put that right here inside of the unload so that once the iframe loads, then it sets all the properties within the page. Now notice the other part is when I'm doing this, I have to be very careful that I am using values that are on the page that are pulled into it. So it's either part of my class variables, or notice how this one gets passed in from the function. So what I would want to do is, in this particular case, is I need to set a temporary variable. Now, to help kind of work with temporary variables and also being very one variable solves all problems kind of thing, I created in my in session, when I set up a bunch of common variables, they're fields, they're hidden fields in the table that sit behind the page. So when I created this section, which is right down here, here they are, what I did was I created 2 variables, tTempID and tTempID2. These variables are used for just this occasion, where we're going to pass something in here and we're going to run the event or run the iframe page, but we need to pass a value to it. So I'm going to say dget, we're going to use this variable, value equals, and in this case it's going to be the community ID, whatever got passed into this function, and then I'm going to take that value read in when it executes this next line after the frame loads, because this is going to load the frame right here. So as it's loading the frame, it's already passing this value, and now it knows what value to use when it executes this frame, because we set it and immediately afterwards use it. Okay, so then the next part is we're going to take this same setup here and we are going to put it here. Now we're doing it for the building. So the next one we want to do is the building ID That's going to come in here. We're going to set the temp ID to the building ID, then run the temp again for, notice in this case it's not edit community, it's edit building that we're setting. So yeah, I'm gonna, that's some in one, half dozen in the other, and we decided do it that way. Copy and paste. Now we got we're setting the building, we're doing the temp value again to pass it, and then we're doing the save position. And the other thing was, before I didn't have the community actually using, when you set up a thing, you weren't setting it where you could set a starting position on a thing. So now I'm using the thing, and I'm actually setting the different value, which means everywhere I run this function, I need a third value. So I'm going to need thing. I'm going to rearrange those. I'll do it in just a minute. Let's get the rest of this function in place first. So this will allow me to set the starting position on a thing. We're going to call that thing. We're going to pass in the value and edit thing. And this particular one's going to be on the thing page. And obviously this one's going to be building page. The other thing I'm doing when I'm going through the code, just for consistency, is I'm processing things in community, building, then thing order, so that they always have some type of consistency with the layouts. Now, after it does that, we don't need to check if the iframe was valid because we've already used it and destroyed it. And so the next part is we're setting start saved, we're setting it to visible, and we've got a timeout to make it hidden so that we can say, yes, we've saved it, and now we're hiding the results. That's the feedback. So when you click the button to save it, it tells you, hey, it's been saved, and then that little message disappears. So that's all this start saved element is. Okay, so now we've told it to do that, but we do not have a thing ID, so the next part we're going to fix is everywhere it uses set starting position, find in files, and so far we're pulling it from one function, use current position, and we're going to pull it in here. Notice building and community, those variables are actually global variables, so I don't have to worry about that. I can put them right in here, and thing ID. Now we've passed, oops, put a comma instead of a period. Okay, so now that we have building, community, building, and thing, when I use the function, when we go back to start function, now we're actually catching all three of them just with the variables. It's the same web page, so I didn't have to create a separate page for it if it's a thing to do it. What I'll have to do is I probably did not give it access to show up in the menu when you're looking at editing your things. So I'll make it a menu option at that point. But that's something we'll go through later. Right now I'm going through the functions to make sure that I've got everything we need. Okay, so that one has been converted. So let's look for another one, set gravity. In fact, I don't have to go far. We have another one right here. Notice we have iframe and we have page, and we're setting them, and we're telling it to save the gravity. So in the same format, we're going to, I actually want this. I'm going to do it above it just so that I don't miss any logic. We're going to set that. That's interesting. I use Z thing ID. This would be a problem considering there is no Z thing ID in any of these functions. I'm using either a building, a community, or thing. So notice I do, if that's not blank, well, it's always going to be blank, which means it's not actually using any of these functions. So this is a good fix. We're going to call it if community ID is not blank. See, you only edit one thing at a time. So you're either editing a web. I'm going to call them webs if it's a community, building, and thing category. Okay, so if you're building a community, a building, or a thing, you're only editing one at a time. So by the time it gets to the code at this part, only one of those three items are set. So it's very easy for me to run a function and then decide which one to run based on which one it's using. Okay, so these have three different iframes. Notice that it's community, building, or thing. technically so far the only one I've been setting gravity on is a community. I guess we could allow it to set it at this point, and what'll happen is on a building or a thing, we can make it affect the gravity when you get close to it. So we'll have to define that area and work on that later. But for now, for the set gravity function, I just want to make sure this is set up to work. So we're going to copy that. We're going to paste it here. And, oops, helps if I don't overwrite that. Okay, so for in this function, we're going to community. That's the page we're going to call. That is spelled with 2 M's. And then we're going to either set the community, which in this case is here. Actually, I don't need that there yet. Okay, so we have the community, and then we're doing set gravity. We're putting the gravity setting, which is going to be, it's going to be a number. So on a normal place, you would have 9.8 gravity of Earth. Okay, so we have those pieces in place. Now we're going to do the same thing with if it's a building or a thing. So I'm going to copy that in 3 places here, there, and there. Copy it to 2 places. Okay, so we have the building ID. So we want to copy that over this one. And then we want to copy the thing over this one. And the last part is this one calls thing, and this one calls building. Okay, now we have all that in place. We can delete this code, and that's another one done. So I'm going to make myself a note in my areas for each item and thing. Okay, so check gravity. Let me put down the name of this function, then we're going to make it check set gravity. We're just going to follow through that code at some point in time and make sure that all the functions to save based on if it's a building or a thing and the functionality afterwards are there. So we're just going to put a note at this time. Right now we're only setting gravity. And why do I have, oh, save gravity, that's a good thing. And then set gravity. So set gravity is actually pulling that gravity value and bringing it back in. Gravity, okay, so we're setting the gravity. Notice it's very, very community centric. We'll fix that later on. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I'm going to find this line again, and we're going to find the next instance where we need to change this. Okay, so this particular one, I like to know where I'm working, so set mold form. So this one's more global. This is the one where we're using the molds, where we've created it, and it works in a community, building, or thing. These are the actual meshes that you're adding to the objects, to whatever you're creating. Okay, and if you're just joining us, just want to say that what we're doing right now is I'm actually dynamically creating the iframes so that we don't have to preload iframes that go back and save our data while we're running a program in the foreground. So we're running our animation in a live thing using Canvas and Babylon gaming engine. And then behind that, what I'm doing is I have some hidden iframes that when you do something in the game or in the program, interactive web browsing, when you click on something and it tells it to save it, or if we are building something, each time it'll dynamically create an iframe, goes to one of these iframe files that I have, loads that up, and then on the onload, it sets the values, submits it, writes it back to the database, and then after it's complete, brings back any data if it needs to, and then destroys the iframe. So we're dynamically creating iframes on the fly, using them, saving data to the database, and then destroying the iframe afterwards. When I originally wrote the code, I was actually creating various iframes, which you can see down here, and then I would tell it to use them. Well, one of two things were happening. In some case, when I'm doing like Google Analytics and I'm posting back what people have hit certain pages and doing different things. I ended up having to queue up a number of pages because there was no way for me to keep track and use them. So I was cycling through 5 different pages. But what happens when the 6th is needed and these 5 are in use already? So that ends up being a problem. Or I'm loading 5 pages that aren't being used yet, and we end up with just more overhead on running the program. This is the index page, which is when somebody browses the website. But when you're actually using the admin tools, notice on the admin page, there's a whole lot more that we're loading in iframes before the site even works. So I'm eliminating all of these sections right here, and I'm rolling it all into, I've got a div, and I'm actually creating in that div the iframes on the fly. This will also make it very convenient for people that are creating plugins to work in this 3D environment, because you can create a plugin that hits an iframe, writes back to the data, to the database and everything else, and we don't have to have it in our original page because we're loading them on the fly. So it's another stage in preparing to work from outside of its own program. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm looking for anywhere that I've called iframes. In this case, from the admin page, notice edit mold. That's the iframe that I'm calling. And so using the function of what I've done, the other thing I'm looking for is there's a lot of data being passed by some of these. I'm making sure that they're all from forms on the page so that no variables are left outside the function. The other part is some of these go a long way, and then I want to make sure that I grab the actual click event when it actually runs. So in some cases I have to duplicate what happens before that. I have to make sure that I'm running one for each click event, because notice there's another click event. This is gonna be one of the hairiest ones to reprogram. Notice the click event here. I'm going to come back to this one. We're going to do some simpler ones first, and then I'm going to come back and catch this one afterwards. There's a lot of logic here, and I want to make sure that I preserve all the logic in place. And I want to make sure I'm not overwriting this code. So I'm going to come back to this one. We're going to do next one first, and then come back to it. So let me search for the next one. Okay, let's just do it this way. Anywhere that I've set this I page, basically I did this function. So I'm going to I just want to find the next one. And now we're into another function and recover shape. Okay, so showing you what I'm doing here. I'm going to, in case thing nulls, I'm double checking where the page is actually writing. So we have the click event right here. So it's all self-contained. That's what I'm looking for first. I'm converting these before the others. The other part is I have an item ID. So just to know, I have to pass that into the variable or into the function. Okay, so going on forward with this, I've copied and pasted a sample of the function here just so that I get the format exactly the same every single time. I'm loading this here. Then also, which page am I loading? So I'm going to the mold page. Notice my iForm edit mold. So that is my iframes mold page. And I always double check if I spell mold or molds and that kind of stuff. Okay, so then I am going to use this variable. Actually, do I even need that variable spelled out here? That's used there. It is not used in the function. That can stay here after the event. There's two things I'm doing in most of my code. When I save something, I save it to the immediate record set that is being displayed on the screen, which happens in this case to be my thing molds array. And so I update it there so that it's always the active element. If you were to leave the site and come back at that point in time, what gets returned out of the database into those arrays and shown on the screen, when I do a save, I want to make sure it's the exact same data that's in that array. So I'm meticulous about making sure that as I save and change things live on the screen, I update the active stream and I update what's in the database so that every time I reload things, you get the exact same instance and there's no gap between the two. So if I'm writing variables of, for example, if I write something that has to creates a new index key, I have to make sure that when I'm running my code, I get that key back and add it to the array, update the value that was being used. So anywhere that things are being used, I have to make sure that they're being passed. Okay, so the next part is in this particular one, we have an item ID that we're grabbing from here, and then we're using it in this function. So what I've done is I've created in my session variables, I have a hidden field that are just 2 temporary IDs, and I'm using these to pass variables to my functions, since that's going to be a function that happens in another place, within another function. So if and you're going to see me type this dget many times. What dget is, I created a function that does document.getElementById, and then I shortened it to dget so that when you see it in the code, it still makes sense. Dget is document get element by ID, but yet it's a lot shorter, a lot easier to type, and reusable, makes code a lot less, especially when you're doing 100,000 lines of code. I don't know if I've got 100,000 yet, but I do have tens of thousands of lines of code. So every time you spell that out, it takes more characters. As you can see, even right here, this isn't even as long as document.getElementById. So we're saving that many characters each time. And then it becomes common in my code. Makes it friendly, makes it easy, and shortens the amount of code dramatically with just one function. Okay, so that one takes care of that one. Now, if I'm not mistaken, yes, we have another one for the building. And these are basically 3 identical processes. One goes to buildings, one goes to communities, and one goes to things. My 3 different layers of items that we're creating that are used in 3D web browsing. Okay, so the next part here I want to mention is, oh, you know something, did I even tell it to go to the communities page on that last one? Or thing molds. In fact, I'm positive I didn't. Before we move on, this one, is it the molds page? Yes, that's where I was. No, it is, yep, molds page. Okay, and this particular one, we're going to mold page again. Okay, I wanted to make sure. Okay, so, when I first created the site, one of the things I ran into, created the code and was testing it out, is when I put all of the different molds or meshes. Mold is my wrapper for meshes, which adds additional settings to the object. So it is the mesh, technically. It's carrying the mesh. Oh, so when I started creating things. So here I am creating a bunch of, okay, let me finish my thought here. Once I created a bunch of meshes that were in communities, buildings, and things, the table that was holding all of these molds, which is the container for the meshes, all of them were getting very large. That table was getting extremely large, extremely fast. And even in the early stages, I felt like if I don't break this down, what's going to happen is that table is going to get too big to work fast and efficiently. I created indexes in it, I did foreign indexes, I did all kinds of things to help sort the table and to make sure it functions fast. But at the same time, the final decision I made was to, even though the mold design, each one has the same fields in it, I wanted to create 3 separate tables, one for community, one for buildings, and one for things. That way, we're actually breaking up the data into 3 separate tables. So that makes it a third each, or offsets the side of each one, and really helps us with balancing out everything. Okay, so we're going to grab that. Keeps the table size down, which means that you'll need less resources to be able to host a file or host a website that's 3D. My intention is to make this where you can put this code on any server that runs WordPress, which is a lot of servers around the internet. Then once you do, you can create 3D stuff just for newcomers and people that are just tuning in. What it is we've created a layer over the top of Babylon Gaming Engine that allows you to host 3D websites. This is for 3D shopping, 3D games, Hangouts, anything else you want to create. But the idea is that this layer handles the multiplayer, the logins, the connecting between the different servers, and it bridges the gap so that the only thing you have to worry about is what you're going to create. Now, when you create things, you have 3 different levels of things you create. One is a community, which is the 3D scene. That's your ground formations, that's your trees, that's everything that makes up the scene itself. It could be your streets, it could be any part of the actual land formation, the scene itself sets the scene. Then we have these areas of buildings, which can be a physical building, and you place those in the communities. By having them separate, we're able to create multiple communities, so different scenes, and then drop the same building in different scenes. So let's say I created a store for 3D shopping. I don't have to just have it in one scene, when you go to my website and that's the place you see. I'm actually franchising them. I'm getting them out there. So I can have a Starbucks in every single scene. I can have one on every corner in every scene. I can create my store and then drop it into all these various scenes, even gaming scenes. I can have it, we can have a scene that has a golf course in it and you're playing a game, and then you go up to a clubhouse, and next door to the clubhouse is my little Webby store. So the idea is you can get these stores, just drag and drop, just put them into the scenes anywhere you like them when you're building your scenes. So now it becomes a matrix of, I create one building, but yet it gets used in a lot of different places. The one thing that this does more than anything else is no more banner ads. You do not have to use banner ads because you get the actual building of the business in your scene. Okay? So there's my 2 minutes of preaching. That catches you up to pace of what we're doing, and at the same time, you get a quick understanding of the different parts that I'm working with and what I'm actually building. So then, just like WordPress has, shout out to WordPress, those guys did it right. What I'm doing is I'm actually, okay, mode deleted, yes, okay, I did that right. And then community modes. One of the things I have is that I'm creating this so that we have the ground layer that becomes 3D internet. It's a common standard. It's going to be open source as soon as I get it ready. And that way everybody can use this as a common layer, which gives us a common standard for creating 3D internet websites. Then with these 3D internet websites, we can create our different pieces. Everybody can build different things, but you can also do plugins. So you're able to, let's say I'm great at building cars, for example. I can create a car that all somebody has to do is they have their 3D website. If they download my plugin, they drop it in the site. Now they can use cars in any one of the sites on their servers. So we're building these plugins to add functionality to the existing sites that you already have. So you can do freemium, which means now the developers can make money as we go. Just like in WordPress, give something for free. So let's say you're building cars, you can build a plugin for that has a car set, and if you, for free, you get the Volkswagen and the, not to knock Volkswagen, you get the Hyundai and the whatever, I'm sorry, I'm using words, I'm not necessarily trying to insult different people. Okay, so you get the low-end models, let's just put it that way, of the different cars. Then all of a sudden, if you pay a subscription fee, premium, or a one-time premium fee, what happens is it unlocks on your server the various vehicles that you use. So you end up with getting money as a developer for everybody that uses your cars in their scenes. Cool, huh? So it's a way for developers to make money. Did you hear that part? Developers can make money. That's what we all want to do. We want to design the world and make money. Okay, so in creating this, we're going to make it the best we can. And let's see, community ID, that goes there. We don't need it in any of this part. I've got this temp ID. We're going to put this value here so that we passed it in. Thing building and community IDs are all global variables, so I don't have to worry about how I pass those in there. We need to get rid of those two lines, and we are now done with another section. Okay, so moving on, we're going to find the next one of these, and submit action zone form. Let's see if this is another. What I'm really looking for is where is the click event, because here it is, action zone click. I can move that before all this piece or actually take it afterwards where all this stuff happens. Since I'm not using it, I'm setting it to what's on the screen. I want that to happen first, and then based on that I'm going to do this, because there's no use in me creating an iframe, for example, creating this huge iframe, setting all these values, and then I come down here and I basically didn't click it. There's no reason to actually do it. So down here, this one says save. So we're going to move all that stuff down to the save function. Then we're going to figure out, see, when we delete something, if we're deleting the iframe, notice the delete function. I'm going to check in the code. I'm going to find out exactly which ones we need, and we're not going to pass everything. We're only going to pass the ones we need. And in this case, when we're saving something, there's just an else, so there's only two conditions here. When we save something, I want to make sure that we get everything we need. Also, this stuff here is the update on the screen as we're going. So I don't see any reason that shouldn't happen first. And if all that happens first, then the scene gets updated faster, the immediate scene you're using, and then we do the function afterwards. So I'm going to move this down here after that. So it's kind of a little bit of maintenance here, a little bit of cleanup. Okay, we're going to copy this function just so that we do the same layout every time. This particular one, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put the function in there. We're going to get it lined up pretty. Okay, so now this is where I'm calling the save action zone. And before I do that, we're going to put all of this stuff up here where I create the iframe page, I create the iPage, and then I set all of these values. They're all coming from form fields, so not one of these are passed values. They're passed, well, they're passed, but they're passed from a form field, which means that within this function, I can grab those same values. I don't have to pre-set up any values. I'm going to put this in here. This is the function we want to do when it loads the iframe. Now notice also the iframe that we're using in this case is action zone. So we're going to set the iframe when it calls this stuff. And let's see, where did it go? Whoa, did I put that in the wrong place or what? Let me back up a step here. Back up a step. Okay. And we're going to put it not there. We're going to put it here. Okay, that looks prettier. That helps. Okay, so all these parts go into the online function, and I'm going to call action zone. Now what an action zone is, my action zones, notice, okay, action zones plural, but everything, a lot of others are singular. Okay, well, we'll get to that. I don't know if I need that different or not, but we'll see. We'll see if we can make it consistent one way or the other. Okay, so action zones, what they are is they're the core of running the site. So Action zones are triggering points to do something. So if I basically, if I create an action zone that, for example, is a load zone, it means it's an invisible box in a scene or around a building or in a building or around a thing or in a thing, depends on what you've built. It's an area that is invisible, but when your avatar walks into it, it triggers something to happen. So those are action zones. There are different types of action zones that we've set up into the program that you can drag and drop and put right into scenes using our 3D CMS. And what it is, for example, is one of them is a load zone. So when you walk inside this, it tells it, go out on the internet, grab some data, for example, somebody's building, bring it back, now load that building, the different meshes that were included in that set. Okay, so that way we can determine what we're loading when. And when you walk out of that load zone, what happens is it unloads and cleans up the scene, anything that you needed when you were in that area. So that way we can load things when we want them and unload them when we don't. This is what makes 3D browsing possible. This is my flux capacitor, I tell you Back to the Future fans out there. The flux capacitor in 3D browsing is that you can load things as you walk up on them and unload things as you walk away. That way, we're not using too much memory in a computer at any one time because we're limiting what you see in the scene. So now we can create these massive 3D cities on the internet, virtual cities, and you're only going to see what's around you in the immediate area. And you can see some maybe large detail at a distance, and as you walk up on it, you get a little bit more detail of the outside of the building, and as you walk up even closer, then it starts loading what's on the inside of the building. So the idea is you don't load any more than you need at any one point in time. And as we perfect creating sites with this dynamic in mind, then we will really start to see the power of 3D browsing. Okay, I've given my flux capacitor talk. Okay, so now the next one I'm doing is I have the same type of load zone I'm going to need. I have all these different values that I brought in here, and now this is for the delete function. So what I'm doing is I know it's on the action zone page. I'm going to put that instead of the save action zone. Now, based on this, well, actually, we need to wrap it in this function because I don't want it to run this function unless it needs to. Why did I just move that? That's the wrong piece I didn't mean to move. Let's put that back where it was. Oh, it is wrapped in the function. I did put it in the right place. I just need to indent it. That's why I do indents also, is because it always tells me if I put things in the right place. Okay. The more you indent and put your code in nice places, the more likely you're going to have less errors in your code. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to double check and see which values I actually use when I do the delete action zone. So I'm going to do a search across all code. I'm finding the Iframes action zone page, and when I submit that particular delete action zone function, I need T action zone ID, I need community, building, and thing, and that's it. And thing equals false. What? Oh, if action zones. Oh, then I was doing an error checking on there. Okay, that tells me when it's a true or false when it worked. Okay, so I'm expecting a true or false when I run this function. Okay, so I have T action zone ID, the community, building, and thing are my three variables that I'm actually using. So in here, the only ones I need to pass are community, building, and thing. My other thing that I'm going through and just trying to be consistent about is always doing them in community, building, thing, because that's the natural layer of things. Okay, and then T action zone ID. Before I erase it, there's one more thing I want to show you. You're going to see this throughout the code, and this is a good helpful hint to teach developers. When I'm working with stuff, many times you're going to see, like in this case, there's an action zone ID, then there's an action zone IND. What that is in scenes, I'm able to create multiple instances of objects. For example, I put a table in there, and then I want to put 4 chairs around the table. Well, technically, it's the same thing design, but there are 4 instances of that design being used in around a table, for example. So the action zone ID is the identifier of which action zone it is in this case. Instead of a thing, it's an action zone. But then the action zone IND determines which one of it is in the scene if I've placed more than one in a scene. Now, you think, oh, I didn't put more than one of these action zones in a scene because, let's say I have a load zone, there's only one around my building. But what happens if you take that building and place it twice in the same community? Now, you have an action zone ID with the same ID of design, but they're different instances because there's a different building that it's associated to. So, IND lets me work with the instances level of a particular design. Now, when we're designing buildings, for example, we are only working with one building at a time, or one thing, or one community. So the IND is the instance we're currently working with. There is no 2 instances being loaded. Now, I can have one with 2 things in it, or 4 things like chairs around a table, could be in one building that I'm working on the building, but notice I'm not designing the thing, I'm designing the building, and I'm placing things into it multiple times. So it's still only one building, and for each instance of a thing that I put in it, it's, that's a dynamic of one-to-many of the things. So basically, you're always going to be working with one. So when I delete a particular zone, for example, in this case, I don't need the index number of the implementation. I'm only working with the original design, and does it have an action zone ID there or not? If I created another action zone in there, it would have a different ID from its design. So that's where there's multiple IDs, and then there's multiple instances of its use. Okay. So, and this is all the stuff that I've done for 8 years of design before I even got to this level where I'm showing it right in front of you. So, as you can tell, it's been thought out, it's been worked, it's been reworked, and now we're going through and cleaning up code. We're making it global so that it works everywhere. What I did was I've created 3D WalkTheWeb.com, and I designed and tested for years all the different various parts to make sure they were going to work. I perfected quite a few of them, made them work well. And so now I'm going through and globalizing the code so that I can have a distributable version to cover the planet with. Yes, we're going to take over the world. It's Binky and the Brain. Okay, what are we going to do tonight? We're going to take over the world. My wife's off in the distance behind here laughing at me. I watched a lot of cartoons as a kid, and I guess everyone here gets the benefit of that because I learned to dream, I learned to create things, I learned to animate. Bugs Bunny, greatest cartoon in the world, which means Brooklyn accent, smart aleck, all that stuff works for me. And it influenced me to do animation, it influenced me to do game design, it influenced me to do anything you can imagine that works with that kind of stuff. So yes, that's where I got my background, that's where I jumped in, started doing all this stuff. Watching a lot of cartoons as kids. Where these kids nowadays play games, I started at the rudimentary level of watching cartoons before that. And as games came out, and we got some Bugs Bunny fans out there. Okay, so back to what I was doing. We need to pass 2 values into this function. So going back to the, just showing you where they are as I go. Temp IDs, I've got a temp ID and a temp ID 2. We're going to use those to pass in the values to the function just before it executes. First one we're going to set is this. And the second one, we're going to set number 2, and that's going to be molds with action zones. And that's going to allow us to put this value here and this value here, so that by the time it calls this function, we are grabbing those values and using them directly off the document tabs, basically the form fields of the values, instead of the passed in values right here. The other thing I like to do is I like to use a Z whenever I see it and haven't done it yet. I like to use Z as a prefix to any local variables within stuff, opposed to variables outside. It allows me to see which ones were passed and which ones are global variable just at a glance. For example, these are global variables on my site, and these are passed in through a function. So local to the function or area that I'm currently working in. And you're going to see that in my classes also. Notice whenever I open one of the classes, let's just see, does this one have, yes, it has passed in things. I use Z thing ID, even with $, even from PHP. I use Z thing ID, Z passed ID. So I'm using it consistently. Anytime it's internally wrapped into a function, I use Z. There were some places where I didn't have it, and as I find them and as I'm going through and perfecting the code, that's the terminology and the way that I'm writing them in. Okay, so we have clear action zone. We've converted that one, and now we're going to move on to the next one. Did it save my little function? Yes, find next. And now we have another one. What I look for first is I'm glancing down. Notice I have all these iPage settings. What I'm looking for is where is the iPage setting that actually does a submit, because these are all setting the values into the iPage, the iframe. But notice in many cases I created the iframe, I started doing things, then I go, oh wait, I need to update my scene, and then I did that. And then I come back here and go, okay, now I'm going to save and click that as if the button was clicked. Well, when I'm converting these over and fixing them, what I want to happen is we're always taking care of our scene first, so that, let's say I'm adding a box to a scene. I got the scene, I click the button add box, immediately a box shows up in the scene, and then I tell it save the box back to the database. See, that's the way it executes, so that the user experience is always immediately, right away, constant animation, constant flow, everything works smooth, that's the goal. And then in background, it's almost like a duck on the pond. Duck's sitting there swimming right along, you see him moving and it looks so calm, but underneath that water, his legs are going 100 miles an hour to keep himself afloat and moving forward. That's that same concept. We're making it very easy on the front end with all the animation, all the gaming functionality, all the CMS functionalities, so anybody can create a game, anybody can build a website that's in 3D, and at the same time, we've got all the heavy lifting, all the coding in the back end, and we're doing all the cleanup, we're writing to the database, and doing everything else that they need to do. So that's the concept behind a 3D CMS website that includes everybody in 3D browsing. Action zones is going to be the function that I'm using, and the first thing I'm going to do is we are going to put the save action zone here. Oops, what did I click? Let's redo that. Okay. We're going to take that and we're going to put it in the onload function. And next, we're going to find the rest of these iPage settings. See, we want to get them all. So whatever logic was used in the iPage part, we're going to grab every one of these, grab all the values that we're setting, put them here, cut them, and paste them into here where we're actually submitting the save action zone function. So we're wrapping it nice and clean, we're cleaning up the data, we're cleaning up the code. Now what happens is when it comes in here, it does action zones is another array that I use. WTW is WalkTheWeb, so action zones is another array that I am calling of a list of all action zones currently active in the scene. Some are not shown yet, Some are shown, but these are the ones that we've gone out on the internet, we've grabbed off of some site, let's say we're bringing in a building, then we bring it back and we put the action zones in the action zone array. Then we check the array depending on our position. Are we in that load zone? Show these items or take them out. So this is why we have the wrapper, for example. The reason is the meshes that we show on a scene are one thing. The molds, which is the container of all the meshes, are the definitions of everything that we've gone out and grabbed, if we've used it or not in loading the scene yet. So we've become that buffer area of what to be ready to load when we walk into an area and what's actually being shown on the scene. See, that's why we had to create this other layer. We had to know things before we show them in a scene. We have to know that we've walked up on the area, we've gone out on the internet, we've grabbed what potentially may need to be shown, and now we have the load zones available. We put those into our scene. We tell it which ones are going to load right away. We put them in the scene, it loads. Then when we walk into that area, now we know from what we've already gathered information-wise in our arrays, for example, building mold arrays, we know which meshes have to be created when you walk into a load zone. That was a mouthful, and if I lost you, stick with it. I'll be going through these things as we hit the different parts, but you're getting a lot of theory today, so it's kind of like a dual action. I'm converting these things over, and as I see things, I'm explaining them to you so that you get the full effect of what this actually does. So we're going to find the next one, and in this case we're doing now connecting grids. Connecting grids are the point where we place a building, a thing, inside of a community or a building. So like if I have a building, a room, and I have a table placed into that room, there's a connecting grid definition that says, in this building, we're putting this thing. That's the connector, that's the one-to-many relationship of what is placed where. So if I have a community and I put a building in that community, you're going to see in the connecting grids, there's the community connecting grid as a parent, and the child item is the building. You can also put a thing in a community, so it has quite a dynamic. But what I'm doing here is, once again, I have a save function, I have a delete connecting grid function, and so I have to accommodate both of those. So I'm going to move to where the code actually does the item. That's why I wanted to practice these a couple times before I do molds, because molds has additional logic in it. So that's one of them we're going to go back to at the end here when we hit all the rest of them. But we're going to do this one first. Okay, so we know we're going to be working with the iframe that we're working with in this case. Notice it's actually connecting grids. So I'm looking at connecting grids iframe. That's the one we want. So first things first, make sure we're going to the loading up the right page. Obviously, if we load the wrong one, then all of the fields that we're trying to set aren't going to be there. So that's the first step, is picking the right web page that you're calling, the right iframe. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take all the rest of these items and put them in here. And we're going to place them into this iframe right here where we're doing the save function. Because of course if we save them, that's what we're gathering all of this information for, is purposely for a save. Now the part is, when we want to delete one, we're not setting all those values. The only thing I need to know is which one we're deleting, and maybe some confirmation type data around it. So what I'm doing is, these ones we're not passing any values into this function, so we're good there. I'm going to do a copy of that, and I'm going to paste that right here where I actually do the delete function. And then from there, I'm going to change the button we're pushing with the click command, the click event. So we've got the click event right there. And now I'm going to double check when I go to that particular function, what are the fields we need. So do a find in all files. It's going to take me right to that class. It's going to give me the piece that I need. So when I click this button, I do that, and the only thing I'm grabbing is the connecting grid. Because connecting grids, before I was passing and confirming, hey, are you on the right building, community, or thing, and I was checking your access to those items. In this case, I have a connecting grid which has different pieces. So when I run that command for delete the connecting grid, I first double check and see if it's in the database, and I pull back the values. Then I see if you have permission on the item that you're doing. So I've wrapped it into the function. So in this case, the only thing I need is what is the connecting grid that you're deleting. So we're going to pass that edit connecting grid, and I believe that's what I just said it was called. I'm going to double check that one more time. Edit connecting grid ID. So that is the one we need right there. We have the value writing in, and the rest of this is not needed. All the way down to delete. Those are the two items we need to make that function work. It's the only thing we're passing. So now on to the next one. And we have the iframe, find next. And we found this one. Swap publish building. Here's another nice little friendly function. You'll see me use the word publish a number of times in the code. And what that is the path that you use to browse the website allows you to go directly to open up a particular community so that you can host multiple communities on one server, and then it allows you to go to the various pieces of it, and it sets your starting point based on where you go. So for example, I have my Webby store in 3 different communities. When I browse that community, they can set the starting point for the community. So if I come in by default just to that community, they can say, hey, start at the beginning of the street or right in front of my store, wherever they want you to start in that community. But as that community grows and gets large, I may go to that starting point and go, where is my store? It's somewhere in this city. What I can do is I can say 3D dot and then the domain name. So http 3d.net/ and then the community. So the name of the community I'm browsing on that server, and then / then the name of the building. So I can say Webby store or whatever they named it on that server. By default, if I type in that path, I will start in their community at my building. That's the dynamics of what we're doing. So you can actually tell somebody, hey, I'm in this city, here's the link, and they can go directly to that particular place in that building. Okay, so they can go directly to the building in that community. So this is a building function, so we're using the building iframe page, and we don't need those 2 lines of code. I get the swap building ID based on this. I'm going to change that to Z since it's an internal variable. And now we have the building ID. That one is a global, which means I'm currently editing that building. Now I want to take that publish name, which is that part of the actual URL, and what I'm doing is I'm swapping it over and I'm changing it so that you can switch which building is in its place at your level on the, for example, in the communities that you support and you're working in. You can swap it. Okay, so you can update your building, create another one on the side, and then swap it out when the new building is ready. Okay, hello all, and thank you for tuning in. What I'm building is 3D internet. I am creating basically a tool that lets you expand, create using a 3D CMS and actually build 3D communities and 3D gaming scenes and games and distribute them just like with plugins and being able to build 3D internet out. So we're going to be able to create internet cities. We're going to be able to have developers create a particular game and just drag and drop it in there, where this layer that I'm building right now not only lets you host a piece of the 3D internet, and it's open source, so you can do that for free, but you will also have the common sense that you can do multiplayer, you can do, we're going to manage communication between those multiplayers, we're going to manage a lot of pieces for you, so that instead of you designing a game from scratch, all you have to do is write your game logic and your game components and create them in the scenes. So talk about quick development, rapid development. You can also do what you're best at, so you can actually create, let's say you've created a miniature golf course. Using our tools, you can use Babylon directly because it's the gaming engine we use underneath it, so you can use Babylon code directly. When we walk up on your golf course, it'll load your JavaScript to do the game logic, but it'll also load the items that you've created to show in the scene. And then people can play the game, and when they walk away, the whole trick about it is when they walk away from your golf course and they're done playing the game, it unloads them so that they can walk right up to something else. We're eliminating the need for the loading screen. We're eliminating the need of banner ads because you actually put your building right in the games. You can have a store sitting next to, let's say you have a miniature golf game. People walk up there, play the miniature golf game, but you have your little hut and you're actually selling product out of your hut. So they play the game, walk up there and go, hey, I want a t-shirt. This is really cool. And they buy a t-shirt right where they're at. So the idea is to mix businesses with games, with everything, as this 3D internet, build our internet cities, and use one common framework that lets us take advantage of all the parts that other people are building. So we're building the common component that lets developers create their instance of a game or a function or something that they'd want to drop in their scene, for example, a car or a boat, and you get the functionality of it just by downloading that plugin and putting it into your scene. So kind of like the model of what WordPress does, but with actual 3D gaming components. So we've got the scene, we have buildings and games that we drop within the scene, and then we have things, which are your cars, your boats, your avatars, and all the various pieces that you drop into your buildings and your communities. So this will allow developers to make money doing freemium offers, something for free, and then you can do upgrades and make money on it to enhance them and give them a bigger experience or more details or additional options in their programs, whatever you want to create. But this opens the door. I love the idea of creating this and setting it free to the world. That's why we're going open source. We want it to get out in the world. We want people to be able to use it and share and be able to get these items that others have created and download them for free and have some type of functionality that you're adding. And then we want the people that wrote it to be able to make some money. That's why we do freemium. It's free, but it has premium offers so that you can make money as a developer. So let's get this out there. And what I'm doing is I've been working on it for about 8 years. So as I'm talking, some things are just like routine. I just start kicking out a topic and it just flows, and chances are I'm not even thinking as I talk. Actually, I doubt that. But the whole idea is I'm converting this out, and I'm currently globalizing everything that I wrote so that it can be an open source version of my code. I have 2 websites I'm working with right now. The one that I'm working on as the open source is 3d.http3d.net, and the one that I created as my master copy, which was my host to begin with, where I experimented and tried all kinds of things, is 3d.walktheweb.com. So as this becomes perfected, then I'll be updating 3d.walktheweb.com with this finalized code so that I'm on the same version that everybody else runs. It's the best way to develop. That's the best way to fix things as we go. That's the best way to set out new releases. So packaging it up, making it all nice and pretty, and then we're going to go with that. So let's see, with that said, right now what I'm doing is I'm globalizing the use of iframes, which save the data in the background so that we can actually take the code and dynamically create an iframe which writes data back to the database while the active screen is live. So when you go to the website, here you are, it's a canvas, HTML5 canvas, it works in all browsers. You didn't have to load a plugin, or you didn't have to load an add-in to your browser. There's no extra code. It is straight Babylon, which is all JavaScript, and it's exposing jQuery to your scenes. You can use either. But it's all raw code, runs it right from the browser, no downloads, no add-ins, it's straight browsing. No extra functionality required. The only thing we do is we use some cookies for if you want to save some settings to make it friendly for yourself. Otherwise, you don't even have to use cookies to make this stuff work. It uses the same technologies as WordPress, so any server that uses WordPress currently will be able to use this code as another website on the same servers. So making it as friendly as possible and just keep creating it. So now, like I said about these iframes, originally when I wrote the code, I wrote in, just to kind of give everybody a quick flashback, I wrote a bunch of different iframes where I would take data that they're doing in the interface in my 3D CMS for building communities and building buildings and building things, and I actually take it back. Yeah, iframes behind the scenes. I know, but I'm dynamically creating iframes behind the scene. I use it and I send data back to, by posting data back to the database, and then come back and I actually, from there, destroy the iframe afterwards. So now I'm no longer using iframes natively in the pages, so that'll kill off, as you can tell. I love your icon, by the way. He's got one with the heads. Icons, don't do that. And like I said, I'm dynamically creating them and dynamically destroying them. One of the reasons I had to go with iframes when I was designing this is that when I first created it and I wanted to do a file upload seemed to be the trickiest piece. If I was just passing data, writing it to a database and back, there's quite a few options you can do that get you away from iframes. But when you want to have a web page that you click a button and it brings up the interface to find the file on your computer, and you select the file and it goes back and it submits it and everything else, the only way I got it to work was when I did it through iframes. So because of that technology, I got used to using it. The other part is the iframe also lets me use the session variables for checking security access, that they've logged in, that they have access to what they're supposed to, before it actually submits those updates. But these are only the updates that are happening locally within your instance on your server. I use JSON and go across in all the other ways. Yes, I know HTML, HTTP requests. Yes, I tested out those things, and like I said, the file uploads were the problem. If we find a better way to do this, like I said, I'm going open source, so if we test out and find a better way to do this afterwards, we can always change it. Until then, I'm going with this way, and that may be a very viable resource. It's just a matter of, like I said, the iframe functionality of clicking it and doing it stuff, that had to do a few extra pieces. So we'll see. We'll see. If we can go there, then we'll definitely go there. The reason I'm going open source is to constantly improve it. So as other developers look at the code in open source, find out what they want to do. So as it finds out, as we do it, they can actually go there, they can check things out, they can look at the code, how it's written, and we all as a community can improve the code so that it's always the best version of itself. Okay, so let me get out what I can get out there, take what I've done as far as I can, put it out there for everybody, and then when you can see the code and start working with it, then basically you'll be able to put in your 2 cents, tell me what works better, and we'll modify it and do it. I'm writing comments in the code where I can. I'm doing everything I can to make it as friendly as possible so that when you see the code, you can actually work with it. If you go to https://3d.walktheweb.com, this is actually in use currently. So let me type that in. This is my sample site. This is where I created the host. There's some flaws. There's some things that need to be worked out. Originally, I tied it into the WordPress copy of a site that I have for my www site, and I tied in the logins. So what I've been doing with this open source is writing it into its own database, into its own system, so that I put it in its own place. That way I can isolate it, and if we want to create connectors back to WordPress so you can share the same user base, we'll create some of those things as a plugin later. But this is kind of some of the stuff that I've been doing, getting it ready for open source. It shouldn't take that long. We should have something out here within the next month. So I'm putting a timeline on the table. I want to have something out by the end of September that lets this release. That's my goal. I'm going to see what I can do. So we'll know at that time. But remember to follow me, because as we're going, if you see what I'm doing, if you find, keep up with my progress, check up on me every once in a while, and basically you'll be able to you'll know where I'm at any time. You'll be able to check it out. Okay, so I'm mumbling enough. Let's get back to converting our iframes into pages, bringing in this code. Okay, we're going to put this here. And this particular one, we are going to swap community, so we're actually doing this from the community page. And that's the community iframe that I'm calling. The other part about what I'm doing is not only am I trying to, well, the reason I use iframes is also its repeatability. Somebody else that wants to do code and make it run can create a separate iframe with their separate functions that work from that iframe page, and so it becomes friendly for more than one way. When we do HTTP or XML HTTP requests and stuff, if we convert over to using that, it's not a problem to do it, but I want to make sure that we've created some samples where everybody can copy it extremely easy. So we'll see how we go with that. Okay, so that one takes care of that one. Let's look for the next one. Actually, it's right here. We didn't have to go too far. So convert this one. And just so you know, 3D-WalkTheWeb.com is my proving ground. It's not necessarily the biggest demo that you can possibly have at this time. There's some different web pages that I've created that show off a couple different functionality and everything. You can load Blender objects directly into it. I have it where you create there's a media library on the login for the administration, and you can actually upload Blender objects directly, and with their animations, you can activate their animations. And this is already designed into my 3D CMS, so we make it real friendly to be able to do those pieces. Okay. As you can see, it's not my first day working on it. I've tested a lot of things, and I've been a programmer for over 25 years. I was a webmaster of the county of San Bernardino, which is the largest county in the United States. A little bit of my credentials. Second Life is a cool game and everything, and I like their functionality, and I could see that somebody could create a plugin that would allow the Second Life functionality to happen on it. But this actually is a framework to build 3D internet cities as a distributed thing. So picture this. We have our 3D scene that when you go to the website, it brings up this scene, and it has, let's say, a game in it, or 3D shopping stores or whatever. The whole idea behind it is that you can take from anywhere in the internet, and somebody can build, for example, a building. Each building is treated as a separate website. So when you do that, each individual website, I can create a building that's a 3D shopping store. Now somebody can say, hey, I want that store on this corner, on this street in my community, or over here next to the beach, or whatever. You can create communities and put them wherever you want it to be. Now, when I maintain my store, they automatically always get the latest version because it's a distributed system. We are talking about creating buildings as websites in a way that when somebody walks through this scene, it goes out, gets my building, brings it back, and shows them my latest version every single time. So that way, it is technically 3D browsing, where I didn't just create this building. I didn't just create a website that shows off a game. I didn't create just a single game. I created a framework that allows it to be a matrix of 3D scenes, 3D buildings, and 3D things, which are your vehicles, your trees, a thing could be a table, a chair, could be a car, could be a boat, it could be something that moves around, it could be something that's stationary, doesn't matter. But these are the items that we place into communities and buildings. So from a developer's point, you can create plugins that create these experiences. You can create things directly from scratch. You can create buildings. You can create these different pieces, and then people can drop them into their scenes. So instead of creating a website and saying, okay, traditional sense, I built a website. Okay, now all of my traffic is dependent on people going to my.com and seeing my website. So all of my advertisement, everything I do, my banner ads, every single way, social media and everything else is to get people back to my website to build traffic and show off, let's say it's an online store. Well, what this does is that makes it where everybody come to me. Well, what this does is it allows you to go to them. So you create your building, my 3D store, and now instead of just having it in my, you go to my 3D website, and instead of just being, here's my building in my site, now you're 3D shopping, which is kind of the approach Walmart and others are taking right now as they're trying to build these. What I'm doing is I'm saying, here's my building. Here, if you go to my site, yes, you get my scene with my building in it and everything else, but you can also take my building and drop it into your scene. So now I get views and I can sell product in your scene on your site, your 3D site. I can sell it on this other one. And I take my building now, instead of just trying to get people to come to me, hey, if that one over there becomes very popular, it becomes an internet city that everybody wants to visit, everybody wants to go there. Now you can actually put my building in that one. I'll tell people to go over there. We're working together. Both of us want you to see that scene because you're going to find my building in that scene. I want it because my building's there. They want it because their building's there. So what we do is we promote together, we share our advertising dollars, and we get people to go to that community. Now, a couple shopping stores, great. We'll get people that don't even play games that want to go there and go shopping just to check out the scene. It could be a full shopping mall of stores. But what if we do this and all of a sudden we entertain them with a miniature golf course or a bowling alley or something else in that city? We will attract them one way or another using different games, different buildings, different shopping experiences, museums, online schools, whatever in 3D. They'll make these different internet cities popular where everybody wants to go. And then the final stage of this, if you're the one hosting that internet city that becomes popular, now you can actually sell virtual real estate. Woo, 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 woo. As a host, you can say, hey, if you want to put your building in my building where I get 100,000 people a day visiting my scene, then now you'll have to pay X dollars to be on this street, in this block, in this certain place in that scene. Yes, we're talking about another way you can make money doing 3D internet. So that's where I'm heading. That's where I'm going. That's the vision I have of what I'm creating. Oh, and then finally, we can have trains. We can have spaceships. We can have whatever we want as transportation between these different communities. That'll be the final stage added in, is to be able to connect the communities or tie them in. So let's say I have an internet city that's here that I built, and let's say there's a popular internet city. I can drop that whole internet city into my scene. Well, guess what? Everything in that city is seen if you go to my scene. So, web traffic, I'm not paying for all the web traffic because it's not even on my web server. Theirs has become very popular for having my scene in it. But at the same time, my store, my sales, everything else are happening in that internet city that's possible. So you can see the design is more about how instead of what we're creating. What this is a layer that makes it 3D internet, that makes it a matrix of different sites that allows you to combine them and reuse them in a lot of different places. And then of course we track all the different page views that are happening in different sites. So when you add one over here, you get your page views on that server. You get your page views on this server, and you know everywhere that it's happening, everywhere your building is being loaded, you'll get your Google Analytics on it. So with that said, I've ranted and raved, gone off on, telling you exactly what I'm building. And so now just want you to know it's in progress, and I'm going to open source. So as soon as I get it ready, as soon as I convert this to global code so that it works for everybody, then we'll start doing the open source. I'll release it, and everybody can join right in and create their own items for it and make money as developers. We'll be creating plugins for 3D. So with that said, let's get back to the coding. Everybody wants it done. Let's get it done. I'm waiting for the person who wants to step up and become the social network for this version of 3D Internet. Because they're going to create a plugin that ties in, like the functionality of Second Life, for example. They're going to be the one who creates that. And anybody that has a website, a scene, and they want social networking to go on, they're going to download that plugin and add it. So instead of being, for example, Facebook, who has a website that tries to draw people towards them, can you imagine if your social network has now spanned the globe on every server? Isn't this the idea behind Bitcoin? Instead of one bank holding your money and doing everything, it has all these servers working together to create the Bitcoin industry. Well, this is how we're going to release programs, games, and everything else. Instead of website-centric, where you're on a particular website, it's going to be that you've released it to the internet and it works everywhere you go. That's the power of 3D Internet. That's what makes us different from anything else you've ever seen before. And just a little subnote, I have patented it, and it's patented in USA, Mexico, it's pending in Canada, India, and the UK. So got a few different countries we're working on first, and yeah, so that's the concept, and that's what I'm actually building. Okay, so going from here, let's get back to coding and let's get this thing done. If you haven't already, please follow me because I get I get some credit for that, followers obviously, but more importantly, follow when I'm done so that as a developer you can start making money in this area. And also you'll know when I release it open source. These are all important things. And you can definitely jump in and start making suggestions to the code to help perfect it. I'm interested in making it the best program we can and spanning the globe. So, Binky and the Brain, what am I going to do tonight? We're going to take over the world. Okay, so let's see. Let's get back to coding. Let's get this thing done. So I'm converting these over so we're using dynamic iframes instead of having iframes on the actual page. Like I said, we don't want to load them unless we have to. And then we're going to load them last second. We're going to pass the information that way, and then we're going to drop it back. Turns out it was the easiest way that I could be able to explain it to somebody else of how to use it. So that's the thing. Okay. And basically let's find the next one. And what's this one doing? Open publish domain. Okay, so we're going to get this one in here. Copy that. I like indenting everything the same, making it the right place for your eyes to see the pages. Okay, we're going to put that inside the wrap. And this particular one happens on the community page. Edit on community. Okay, grab this one. The other thing you're going to learn by watching me is I am not married to code. If I can come up with a better way to do it, a shorter way, a cleaner way, whatever, I will do it in a heartbeat, and I will convert all the code to look that way and to be that way and everything else. A lot of my standards that I created so far were just that, ways that I do things. As I was creating this, not only am I trying to standardize the way things happen, but another important part is I'm trying to make it repeatable. I'm trying to make sure that if you came in here and you saw something, you're going to be able to go, oh, I see what they're doing here in just a glance. So sometimes my notation is a little bit more longhand than shorthand. For example, an if statement, when you're only doing a single line, you don't need the squiggly brackets at the end, and yet I always use them. Just things like that. They're so subtle, but when you look at the code, it makes it easy to find things. The other part about that one is when it turns out that I need to add additional things to it, it always has the same formatting, easy to drop additional functions in different places. It's all part of rolling it up, making it all work extremely well quickly. So let's see, we have that one. That value is actually going to get set in the query string, so I want to, it's a different query string. I'm going to set that value. That's a little catch here. Notice I'm getting the query string, but that's of this page, and if I bring it into the other page to happen, it's going to be happening on the iframes, so I need to pull this value first, and then I need to pass the value into the function. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to come in here. We're going to create the iframe piece, and we're going to tell it what we need to pass. This is what we're going to submit on that page. And by the way, these are all good questions, and I appreciate it. And anytime you have a question, feel free. That's what I'm here for. Okay, and that's going to take care of that part of it. The next part is this pre-building thing. So, as I've said before, I have a certain variable that I use to pass variables into functions. Okay, we're going to say dget. Notice my dget, if I haven't said it out loud in a few minutes. Trying to type and think at the same time sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. Okay, so the dget is document.getElementById. I shortened it down to this because I was typing that hundreds of times or thousands of times over and over again in 1,000 lines of code. This is enough that I still know exactly what it is. It's not like a shortcut, like a one-letter shortcut. It's enough that it tells me what I'm doing, but yet at the same time lets me take advantage of it in the code and actually lessen the amount of characters in the code by thousands immediately. So was a good shortcut, took advantage of it, and that's my story, and I'm sticking with it. Okay, so this one, okay, we're going to put it right here. Actually, we're going to, now I want to make sure. See, we're going to check the variables before we go in. I want to make sure it exists before it actually does the function. The reason is, in doing this way, the only way it works is this: if you actually submit it, you click the domain, and it makes its round trip to delete it afterwards. So periodically, I'll have in the process where it does some cleanup in that folder, just to make sure if somebody didn't clean, if the process broke, it'll still make some cleanup. So I'll do some garbage cleanup afterwards. But for now, let's make sure that value already exists. Publish domain, we don't need to worry about that so much. Let's see, what's this function? Add domain name. Okay, that's just passing it if it has it, otherwise it leaves it blank, which is fine. I'm not expecting a variable there. Okay, so next. Okay, from here. This one's checking the publish name. Copy that. Publish names are part of the URL, just so we can distinguish which element we want to bring up at any one time. Okay, we're not passing in anything, so we're good on that one. It's the other thing I'm checking as I go. I want to make sure that I don't pass any local variables into it without handling them properly. So in this particular case, it's going to be right here. Like I said, I really care about format. I care that it all looks the same every time you see one. It helps developers. Okay, and this one basically we're just setting a domain name. Through the CMS, a lot of these things, in fact all these things, are called from within our CMS code. So, okay, that is indented to there. We know that we have a publish domain value, Okay, whatever logic I did on there, I'm going to leave it in place right now until we determine a reason later. This function's not currently in use on the code, but I'm going to set it anyway because there's a couple functions I dropped at the bottom of the page that I took them out of the code currently because I do it other ways, but they had potential where I was going to revitalize it and make a few changes and then possibly reuse it. So I wasn't ready to delete it yet. When I go to do the open source, it'll be the last thing I do. I'll go through these. I put them at the bottom of the page so they're not in the function. Notice how far I've scrolled down on this page. So I put them in the bottom of the page. I bring it in here and I just decide, okay, is it something that I'm going to use or not? And if I do a search across the code and I haven't used it by the time I'm done with the open source, making sure everything's functional and running smooth, then I'll delete these. In the meantime, I just want to make sure that they're handled and are complete functions. There was also a number of other things that when I tested out the site, I wrote them in as, right in the code. I wanted to see, hey, can I do a 3D blog where if you post something on a wall, it shows up, and, all this really cool stuff. And as I tested each one of them, I wanted to make sure that they worked. So if they, no matter what, doing two things at once here. Okay, so as I tested things, I would throw them in the code. I wrote them into the 3d.walktheweb.com website, and I'd try the different elements and everything else, but they were natively written into the core of the product. So what I've been doing as I go through and work on it here is I'm separating out what is the correlator, what's the minimum it needs to make it run fast, work well, and be in place. And so by doing that, what I'm doing is, okay, where was I? Finish talking, then type, then search, then think, then drink coffee. Okay, let's put it back in that order. And so as I'm going through this, I'm not only cleaning up the code and bringing it down to the bare minimum that we need to make this all function, but I'm putting those samples of code into different folders for the different plugins, and then I can develop the plugins later on and have them as optional add-ins. And then they'll also be open source, the different plugins that I create, most of them. There'll be a couple that they'll be open source. We'll do that. But the idea is that I'll have them out there for samples, so if people want to create improved versions of a lot of this functionality, like if I create a blog, hey look, here's how I made it work, here's how it does work, boom, you can do it. And all of a sudden somebody goes out there and goes, oh my gosh, that is cool, I want to be the blog master, I want to be the person who creates blogs for 3D internet, I want to own that concept, just like social networking, I want to be the social networking king of 3D internet. Well, then you create the plugin that just blows mine away, uses it, and I use mine as, here's a sample one you can create, here's how we did it, and then you create this master of a project and you say, here's my release of how it all works and what you can do with it. So that's the concept, is I'll create the ones to show you of concept-wise how they work and what goes, and then individual developers that want to make money can go through and create their versions of those different pieces. Okay, so we have iPhone users, and that's really interesting because there's no call. I already fixed that one and forgot to delete the piece that was left. So find next. This is the one I was waiting to come back to, and it's time I've came back to it. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is look at, I've got to separate out a few things here. This one does a lot of manipulations. It does a lot of updates to the site. It does a lot of updates to database. It does some logic based on what is written on the page opposed to how it's stored in the database. And has some checking. It has all kinds of fun things written into here, so that's all good on that part. I want to make sure those variables aren't used later on the page, because sometimes some of them are. The biggest thing is I need to see where these pages are submitted, because all of this information is collected and checked and added to the frame page, but it isn't selected or it isn't clicked until here. So because there's a condition on that, I don't want to build the iframe page and then it never gets submitted. I want to make sure that there's some type of thing that says, hey, look, it's here, boom, does it, we're good to go, and it works. Okay, so what we're going to do is, this is where it actually gets submitted. So this is where I'm going to put all that code that, and this one's delete mode. Okay, I'm going to do that one second. The one that I want is the actual save mode click, because that's the one that's going to use all of these fields. So we come in here, let's find it, and it's after all these manipulations happen. Now remind you, what it's doing is on the page, it is adjusting everything that happens on the screen, and then it's, okay, I want to make sure, check out your modes. That part can happen. I don't want that to blank out until after. Okay, see, that's why I'm checking this one. It updates what's on the screen so that the current array has all the latest settings that you've done. Like when you when you change a mesh and you say, I want to put this texture on the surface, or you want to resize it, you want to reposition it, you want to do whatever you want to do with that mesh. So you've set all these settings and you've gone through with the CMS, you made all these changes. When you click save, now it's going to take that record, or that index of the molds, which are all the molds. It's going to put it in there, or it's not molds. It is the building, the thing, or the community. I'll show you where I do that in a second. But it takes that item and then it updates the array for that with all these latest values so that it matches what was in what is being written into the database. That way, what you see on your screen, if you were to refresh your page after this save happens, everything that you have on there would automatically be, if you reload your page, you get the exact same settings in the array. It's making sure that we're consistent on how we implement things. Okay, so with that said, this one's going to be a little different, and this is where the other complexity comes in, is this piece here. Actually, I think we're doing it to the molds page, because this is a mold we're working with, which already sets it dynamically to work for all molds. It doesn't matter if it's a building, thing, or community. This particular process will write the correct one to the right place. I'm going to put these in here. And the other thing is, I am resetting the new mold to 0 after I do this process. So I don't want to wipe out that value until the iframe has gone. And since I'm taking the iframe out of process, loading the iframe, and then doing this onload event for that particular page, I don't want it to actually happen until after that is completed. Which means this here, ooh, I got to go back through these. This is the parent one that it happens on. So parent, document, get mold by ID, this value, change it to there. I have to do that in every one of these that I called that for. So that was a good catch. Everywhere I've used this function, because it's happening on the iframe, those values are sitting on the original page. So I have to call them as parent. So yes, good catch. I'm glad I thought of it here. Now I have to implement it by using it everywhere. Everywhere that I didn't have a local variable, everywhere that I pull these, they are pulling the values of this. Okay, so here's where we get tricky. Okay, so just to confirm, it is the mold object that I was creating. I'm going to grab all of these values for iPage. Okay, I'm going to, well, okay, so iPage, I'm manipulating all these things. Set a tune, iPage, we're still setting the iPage values. If the shape is an image, I have some iPage values. I have to set these based on if they're being used, and all the way, oops, I didn't mean to release the cursor. Should hold down shift. And I'm going to take all that out of there. At the deleted mold. And then this is if you are saving the mold. Okay, so every bit of this is going to go right here. And then oops. I'm going to take all that. We're going to just indent it just so that we're consistent of how we look at things and use them. Now see, the good part about this is because I've switched around this page, it doesn't have to go through and load all these things if the only thing I'm doing is deleting. 3D Internet, yes. There's a video that I have that breaks down a code review, but also there's also videos talking about 3D Internet. But in a nutshell, 3D Internet is, without going too far into it here, 3D Internet is, I've extended the Babylon engine into a framework that allows you to host communities, buildings, and things all in one from a server and interconnect them throughout the internet. What happens is I can build a 3D store, just the building, and then somebody else can have a community, which is a scene. And the 3D scene, you can have many of them all over the internet on each individually hosted using this open source software that I'm building. And what'll happen is you can put that building into the scene. Then as you're walking in the scene and you approach the building, it actually goes out into the internet, grabs the latest copy of the building, brings it back, and then renders those meshes that create that building with all of its functionality in place. So what happens is, and this works for games too, so a building, instead of a building, it can be a game logic that when you're in this area, like let's say I'm going to play a soccer game. When I walk onto the soccer field, it loads the logic for how the soccer game works. So as we're walking, it's loading this information from some website on the internet, brings it back and uses it within my site. So with that said, what it has is the concept is about using the whole internet and turning it into a single game engine site, you know, basically not site. It's using the whole dynamic of the internet so that every piece of it can become part of 3D internet. And it's all about, as you're walking, it's loading things, and you use it when you're in that area in the scene, and then when you walk away, it unloads it. The whole idea is a game usually loads everything up front that you're going to use on a particular level, and then you play it. And when you're done with that, it unloads that level, and then it loads the next level. Now you're playing that level. Well, there's only so much that your computer can hold. So the idea is to dynamically load and unload what you have to run at any one point in time. This is the ultimate of that vision. This is letting anybody on the internet create plugins that work on this site to work with this open source project. So you can create an item like a car, drop it into a server. Now all of a sudden everybody on that server and those scenes can now use it. So the main concept here though is the 3D building itself is a website. It's the data that creates a 3D object in your scene. So when you go on a web page and you click on a link, it goes out on the internet, wipes your page clean, comes back, and then loads the page that you clicked on. So now you're browsing and you're looking at that site. What I've done is instead of clicking links, I created invisible cubes or shapes that when your avatar walks into them, it's equivalent to clicking a link. Now it knows what we call them is load zones, and it goes out on the internet, grabs the definition of all the objects that you want to load, brings them back, and puts them right back into the site. So that as you're walking, boom, now it loads it up. Now you're using that particular building or thing inside your site. Very cool, huh? Okay. Okay, we'll take that question offline, and I'll be able to hit that one up for you. But the idea here is that we're basically we're turning the internet into one big long game. We're using a game engine. Now in my component, what we're creating in this open source is we're creating the multiplayer functionality. We're creating the ability. It's a 3D CMS, so you're able to create communities, which are your 3D scenes, your buildings, which are it could be a physical building or it could be an area that you load to load a particular game, but it's your isolated areas of logic where you want to load game engines, or where you load game logic, or you load different objects that you're going to see when you're in that area. And then things, which are like your cars, your boats, your tree, your table, your chair, anything else that you drop inside of a building or a community. So I've simplified everything down to 3 components that we work with, and then this 3D CMS lets you create and work with these components. Now, you can use Blender to create them, and we can include the full animations from Blender. So Babylon has the importers. We work with all that. I'll be doing tutorials on that stuff as we get to that level. I've already done some tutorials of different things back on the www.WalkTheWeb.com website. The 3d.walktheweb.com website is my proving ground and testing ground. So you'll see some of the stuff I've tested there. And we're working on creating the open source version based off a copy of that code. So I'm stripping it down to the native stuff, globalizing all the variables, globalizing the way it works, making it run as efficient as possible, and that's where we're going. So follow me, keep updates, and I'm really hoping that by the end of September I can release the open source version and get it in everybody's hands so we can start using it and start getting out there on the internet. But like I said, it's a matrix of sites that will work together to form 3D internet. And that's why we're going open source, so that everybody can do it for free, become part of the internet. Then there's freemium offers. For example, you get something for free, you get the code, you can create your 3D buildings, you can create your communities and your things, and then if you want to use certain enhanced functionality that uses a lot of my server space or what have you, like doing backups off your site at the click of a button, anything like that would actually then allow me to, I'll make some money on stuff like that. But that's separate than this open source project. That'll be a plugin that you can use, and it's optional. You don't have to use those plugins, but that's the idea. That's the whole thing. That's the gaming site. That's how it all works. So that way people can create standard components. You already know, you'll have a copy of the code. You can create things that work well in it, and then be able to distribute them and make money off of plugins in 3D that you create. So you create a car, they can drive it around, but if they want these advanced features, it's a freemium offer. Here's your free version. And if you want to upgrade, you can get these selections of cars, or you can get this additional functionality to the car where you can do X, Y, and Z. Maybe you get to drive the car by yourself, but if you want to take on passengers, you pay for the upgraded version. So this is the kind of stuff that we can do that lets developers make money on the 3D internet. At the same time, we'll build it up and we'll make it a common community of 3D internet for all developers. Everybody can make money at it. Okay, so of course, shameless plug, follow and you'll be able to know when we update it and release the source. Nobody runs the internet. We're not going there. That's a political thing. Al Gore does. No, just kidding. Just kidding. Okay, but you have to pay for .com. Yeah, right. You pay for your domain name, but you run it. You can host it. If you want to use my host, you can host websites for free. If you do any of the updated features or functionality, then you'll pay for those. So I'll even give a place. You're going to be able to download the code and run it on your server. I'm writing this code in the same way that WordPress works, where you can download it and load it on your own server. I'm using the same technology, so anywhere that a WordPress site exists, you can put this site and use the same technology, no additional changes, and it'll run a version of this site. So that's what the open source is for, is to get it out there where everybody can use it. It's not set up to release yet until I release this open source version, then you'll be able to do it. And because I haven't globalized the variables, the copy of code I have right now wouldn't work yet. But within a month, I'll have it out there. So follow and know when I release it. That'd be great. Love to see you then. Also, come back and watch me build it. You'll get updates all the time while I'm working. And you can't host on your own website just yet, but you will be able to. So, okay. So getting back to it, I want to get this done as soon as I can so that everybody can use the website. Okay, so this is the part where we're setting the current That's setting the current array. Then notice I'm bringing in certain things like the mold IND, which is the mold index, which I need to pass into this function. So we're going to use my pass variable, temp ID. Okay, just so you know, there's two things that you should check out, and that is there's a video I did a few days ago. It's kind of the first in the series, or one of the first two in the series, but it's labeled specifically for a code walkthrough, and it tells you what the different parts are and what they do. So that's a good one to check out. Also, if you check out my YouTube, WalkTheWeb on YouTube, there's a bunch of videos of things I've created and some demos I've tried and different things. Yeah, and you know something, the whole thing is I've got a doctorate in education. I worked for the largest county in the United States. I was their webmaster. So I've worked with high-end websites. I've worked with high traffic websites. I've worked on sites that have over 500,000 page views in 12 hours. I've worked on servers that host over 300 million page views in a year. So I'm doing this in what I know works in all locations, all servers, all technologies, and definitely I'm looking for people that want to basically be apprentices. You want to make money at this, you want to develop for this, be an apprentice. Watch what I'm doing, learn from it, watch how I did the code things, and then create your own plugins as we go and run your own business. Become your own business in building things right from your home. You can build things, drop them into what we'll have as a marketplace by the time I'm done, and you're going to be able to create things, and you're going to be able to make money at it. I want you to make money. I'm successful when you're using my product to make money, because that means it's going to become popular and other people are going to like it. Yep, and the knowledge doesn't hurt. Everything I'm doing is, you're looking at 25 years experience and also some of that top-end experience. Yep, and I love to teach as I go. So as I'm doing things, I'm talking through it. I'm telling you why I'm doing things. And that's the kind of stuff you're going to learn as you watch my videos and as you watch me stream. That's the kind of stuff you're going to learn constantly. So just to know, that's what I do. I talk, I teach. I've taught college programming level classes. I've taught algebra. I've taught other classes. But I'm a programmer who's been around a while, especially web. Web is my specialty. I've had to make things work in all environments, all browsers, all everything you can imagine. And so but I definitely appreciate everybody that stops by. We're definitely building an online community of people that want 3D internet. I'm going to give you a lot of free tools. I'm going to teach you how they work. I'm going to teach you, going to teach you a bunch of stuff, and you're going to be able to conquer the world with 3D internet. Yep, that's the whole plan. We're going to do everything we can for 3D internet. So, with that said, let me get back into some of the stuff here. Now, what I just uncovered was I just realized, well, let me finish. I'm going to finish putting this the way I've been doing them all along first, because I've got one more to do, and then I'm golden on that, and that is the mold value. I need to know that, so I'm going to copy and paste this, because all these values were let into this function, and then I did either a delete or a save, which of course you don't need all these fields for a delete. You only need to know them when you actually do a save. So let me come back up here. I'm going to paste this in place, then I'm going to check out the actual command and see what is it I need. There's only going to be about 2 or 3 values that I need. And so when I do a delete mold, and mold is my wrapper for a mesh. One thing about it is, okay, if I mentioned it a while ago, but just to refresh your memories, one of the things about it is I use the word mold because Babylon uses the word mesh, and so does everybody else in 3D programming. Mesh is your raw data to create the object. When I say mold, it's my wrapper of the mesh. So it allows me to add all the additional properties that I use in my technology to make 3D internet possible, like preloading these definitions before we're actually using them. So when they worry about a mesh is the shapes and objects that you actually create in 3D in a scene. For example, if I put a cube in the scene, that cube itself is a mesh. Each object, it could be a sphere, it could be a number of shapes. There's a whole bunch of shapes we can create. Each one is a separate mesh. It's a definition of an object in 3D. So then, what I do is, when I have this mesh, then I go out there and I wrap it with all the data I need. See, they only concern themselves with a mesh when it's actually used in a scene. So right before they do it, they create it, and now it's in the scene, now it's a mesh. What I do is I preload it when they walk into an area, and I bring it in as a mold saying, this is all the data, and this is the information about when I need to use that mesh and load it and show it in my scene. So I become that middle layer before the game engine takes over and says, put this mesh in. My code generates that mesh when it needs to, on demand, because of where you walk. So preloads to let you know that, hey, you're potentially going to walk in this area that has this mesh. Then if you do walk in the area, I actually build it and show it. Now it's a mesh, now it's in the scene. Okay, so that's why I use some difference in naming schemes. Okay, now, equivalent of mesh in 2D space is we have a plane, which is just a plane, but even in 3D space, a plane can be viewed where it almost where it technically disappears when you look on a particular angle. Yet when you rotate, you can see that it's a plane. Then it disappears when it's a perfect, look straight down like a knife edge. But what we're seeing when we look at it on a computer is we're actually looking in two-dimensional space at a three-dimensional object as we walk around. Then, if you'll look at my interface down in the bottom right corner on 3d.walktheweb.com, there's a little gear for settings, and you can change which camera view you use, and there are 3D cameras in there. So even though when I say we're building 3D internet, we actually are building 3D internet. It can be rendered in 2D, or it can be viewed in 3D. It can use the Oculus headset. It can use these different items to browse it in 3D. That's the goal. That's where we're heading. That's what we're going to perfect as we do this. But the idea is that you can view it in many different ways, but it technically is defining it, and it is generated as 3D objects in its own definitions. Okay? All the math involved, in fact, what I do is I use the different camera views in the Babylon engine. When I first started, I experimented and started creating my own gaming engine, and then I thought, I want this to happen sometime in the next decade. So basically, I found Babylon Gaming Engine. It's open source. We're able to get it everywhere. I'm building the open source, and it'll probably be released within a month. I have to finish globalizing all the variables from my test site, so no, not next decade. Well, if I had to write a gaming engine from scratch. Instead, I decided to use Babylon because now we get the support of a good gaming engine behind us. You can extend it and code you write for it to put into plugins and use throughout the site. And at the same time, so we inherit all the functionality of Babylon, and I use it to put in my middle layer, which is all of the stuff that makes 3D browsing a possibility. So my code says every single building that I have out on the web internet is a separate website, and when you walk into areas, it goes out on the internet, brings it back, and loads it into your scene. That's 3D browsing. And then when you walk away, it unloads. So this is open source project. It is not released open source yet because I have to finish doing these global variables. Once they are, this code that you're seeing right now will be released, and it will let anybody, like a 3D CMS, you will be able to create 3D websites using this program that are 3D browsable. Okay, so that's what this is. This is the stage of the program that allows you to create that piece. And this is going to be released open source probably within a month when I finish globalizing all the variables so that it'll work on your servers. I'm writing the install process so that the second you install it, you have something up and running within 5 minutes. I want to make it simple on that end of it. And those are the pieces that I'm putting in place over the next month. Once they're in place, then we're actually going to be able to, we'll release it, and just by downloading the code, putting it on a server, any server that runs WordPress can run this code because it's the exact same technology on the back end, and JavaScript and PHP and MySQL. So then you get it for free, you put it on a site, you load it up, the install process lets you create your very first site in less than 5 minutes. That's my goal, that's what I'm working for, and that's what I'll be releasing. So follow me, keep on watching as I go, and I will definitely, I'll definitely drop it out there when it's ready. And in the meantime, I'm showing you all the code facehand anyway, so yes, it is going to be open source, and yes, you can follow me as I go, and we'll definitely, you can watch me finish building it. I do a couple hours every day. You can catch me, follow me so you know when I'm on. And then on Mondays tends to be where I try to do some show and tell and some more in-depth Q&A, so that I have some more coding times where I'm really diving in and trying to get it done. And then I have other times where I'm going to be really just be there for you. So if you catch me Monday at, let's say, let's go after lunch, because we tried it a couple times at lunchtime and it didn't draw the traffic. I think people want to eat. Who would have thought, right? So what I'm going to do is Mondays, let's do it at 1:30 in the afternoon. That's California Pacific time. And 1:30, I'll put it on the site so that you can see it when you come back and visit. I'll put a little post on there saying 1:30s, we'll get together, we'll talk, I'll show off some things, and we'll also show some demos. We'll go into Q&A, and we'll get all your questions answered. But for now, we want to get this thing coded, so I'm going to dive back in and jump in on the code. Please follow. Of course, the more followers we have, more likely I'm going to be, pushing to get this done and get it out there for all of you for the open source. Because, like I said, my intention from the very start was always to be open source with this, get it out there and let everybody use it so that we have a common framework to build the 3D internet. Okay? So with that said, I'm going to dive back into coding, and I want to thank every one of you for being here. And I'll be popping on and off, catching you online. I teach as I go, so you'll hear me talking about what I'm doing and why, some of the logic behind why I did some things. Other pieces are going to, other pieces are pretty self-explanatory. I make a lot of the code standard so that I repeat the same thing over and over again. I'm very meticulous, trying to make sure that the code looks the same way, acts the same way, so that you always, if you see one thing and you say, oh, I see how that works, now you see it in 100 places instead of something different. All these code samples will be out there when we do the plugins. We're gonna make it where I'm putting it in your hands as a developer to create 3D Internet plugins that work on anybody who downloads the open source code. Okay, and we're going to do freemium so that you can have it in our marketplace. I haven't built the marketplace yet. Open source first, marketplace second. We're getting there. But you're going to be able to release your code and do the whole thing. So, yep. So that's the whole idea. And I want to thank everyone for viewing and coming in here. And keep following. I'm gonna keep building. So, okay, I'll try to catch some of your questions before I log off. I'll kind of review back across the chat and try to catch them before I actually log off. But for now, back to the coding. So let's see. We have delete mold. Whenever I do the delete mold click. Okay, so this one's going to take it to a separate area. It's going to be the mold ID, and then if it's a community, a building, or a thing, so then it has to handle each one of those separate. So the only things I really need to pass are the mold ID and the... Okay, so out of all these fields, when I do a delete, the only thing it actually needs are these 4 lines at the top here. So we're going to get rid of the rest of this that I copied from my save, my save thing. But see, before, the way I had the code sitting there, I was building it, I had it doing 3 or 4 different things. Now I've refined it down to the 2 core function it needs when it hits this function. So now I just have a lot less functionality it has to do. So now we're going to clean up the way it runs, and of course now it doesn't have to do every one of those pieces every single time I load the code. A lot faster, yes, you can see already. I take that all out of there. Now if you're deleting something, it actually deletes it out of the array first, so that immediately on your scene it's gone, it's been handled, and then it does the cleanup by deleting it out of the database. It's a common format I do on the stuff that I'm working with. I want to make sure that your scene that you're working with happens no matter what. Okay, so because the molds are common, they all three have molds, they all have the same design, they all have the same layout, even the arrays have the exact same array configuration. So with all that in place, what I do is, depending if you're working with a community, a thing, or a mold, or a building, those are the three items, what it does is it automatically, the mold group is actually telling you what it is. It's a community, a thing, or a building. Then since I'm bringing that in here, then I load molds is the array that I'm using, the array of the separate community, buildings, and things. Now the reason I separated it once again is because those tables got too big in my testing grounds, and I needed to separate them into three different tables so that they don't become too monstrous in your MySQL, and the arrays themselves are faster to handle with. It's almost like splitting it in three based on what type of thing you're building or loading. And since everything you walk through with our load zones are by these three categories, there was no reason to combine, to search through 3, 4, 5, sometimes 10 times more data than the actual thing you need. For example, communities are, there's a lot less communities than there are buildings, and there's a lot less buildings than there are things that you put in buildings. So the dynamic of that is we don't want to look in the things table unless you're looking for a thing. That's going to be the largest table of the bunch by the time we're done. Buildings are another one. If we're looking for a community, like you first go to the website, if I was searching the table with all that data in it, everything I do is slow. But because I separated communities, and there's fewer communities technically on a server than there are everything else, I'm looking in a small set, it grabs exactly what I need, the community gets started, it's up and running faster that way. So it had two concerns in mind: bring the community up as fast as possible, and then separate it so that it doesn't get too large in your databases or in your arrays. When I use an array, I cycle through the array to see if there's anything I need to build, if I need to show it in a scene or not. So it creates the actual mesh. So by doing that, what happens is each one of those arrays, the cycle of looking through the array for what things you get closest to, I can do them separately between the community, the thing, and the building. So those particular items, by being smaller arrays, lesser items in each one of them, makes the code actually handle faster. And that way we keep the scene rendering up fast, we allow it to generate on the fly, we bring things in and out of those arrays all the time. When we delete some, we remove it from the array. When we fetch something out on the internet, we bring those items into the array. So it's all about managing this whole data of what can and doesn't need to be seen at any one point in time. Okay, so now, while I was doing all this stuff, one of the things that I came across that I know I need to do is everywhere I have this, I'm going to start in my common file, just because I want to be methodical about how I go through these. And the thing is, oops, I didn't mean to paste it on the scene. That's not what I'm doing. I'm going to do a search on this page. I'm doing one page at a time. If I bring back all the results, that's just a whole lot of stuff. But when I bring this stuff on here, what I have is, okay, so we find next, and I have to remember, this is an onload for the actual item. Now, let's see, the onload on the frame. Oh, actually I stand corrected. I do not need to, because this is the onload of the frame item, which is in this scene. I got myself confused on that one. I was thinking one step too far, and I was thinking I was putting things in the page or calling them from the iframe page, which I am not doing. So the good news is I don't have anything to fix there. And that's always a good thing. So that means I only made one mistake, and that's when I put the word parent on this item down here, because it is on the same level. It is happening in the main page. It's not happening on the framed page, which is good. This is really good news, because now the only thing that happens on the frame page is when I call iPage. That is the content of the page that I'm working with. So now this should all work, and I believe we've finished. Let's go one more check across everything. I want to make sure, oops, why do I keep pushing that? Helps if I do the right thing. I want to find, and I'm going to find this in all files. I want to see where I'm actually calling the frame. So, okay, first thing is components. I'm not going to worry about those because those are my new plugins. That's under components, so those three aren't going to be an issue. Now under avatars, load. Okay, so load over avatars. These ones have some frames, and also in the common page there's some here. Okay, so what I want to do is create iframe. That is the one I'm using. That's my function. So this one, be upload community page, start upload image. Okay, so this one, we're going to do this one. My image, oh no, okay. There's certain ones that I'm actually leaving the frame page in place. I'm actually using it as that from the core. So by doing that, there are certain ones that have to do with images where I upload them, that the image upload page, this is in the admin, we have a media library. And in the media library, you can upload directly your different textures and your images that you plan to use on your community buildings and things. So when I do them from that page, it's okay to be native to that page. First of all, it's part of my course, so you don't have to worry about it. It's not something you have to interface with. And also, it's not, that part isn't, that's remarked out. We're not going to use it anyway. It's not going to be used for the plugins this way. So there's a couple things I did. I just want to double check how I'm doing those and what I'm using with them. That's not a big deal. Okay, save avatar display name. Okay, these ones I need to change, and this uses the avatar form field. So we're going to come in here. Okay, my avatar, that's the one we're going to pass in there. My avatar is that value, so I can set that. Okay. Okay, so we're going to finish out these last couple of them, and then we're going to call it a day, and got some other coding I need to do. So, okay, so here we have this. We're going to wrap in this call. We're creating iframes on the fly to do database functionality and then returning it to its page. And that's avatar instead of avatar. See, this singular and plural on those iframes names are going to kill me. They're going to be the death of me, so I'm going to make sure we're consistent on that next. Little things like that. Any chance I get that I can. Okay, so that one, and then I change it based on if the user is not logged in, and then that one gets used here. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put, and do I use it anywhere else other than in the frame? No. Okay, so this I'm going to just travel this along with the frame page. Oops. Okay, those two are that. Okay, so now it determines what that is within the actual iframe function. Okay, and this part here is not blank. Then save the avatar display name. That only happens when it's, well, that's a redundant thing. It only happens when it's not blank. So it's either that or this. It's not going to be blank ever because I'm not even running this function if that's there. So once again, cleaned up the code. We don't need this piece. Copy that here. Okay, so it is this one because we're only running this code when it happens that way. This can be making sure that we're setting the name properly outside, and the only thing we actually have to do is grab that value and put it in here. Okay, so these values are already set. We're good to go. Fixed up some logic there. Got rid of a variable we don't use. Nice. Okay, so had to dive in some thinking there. Sorry if it took me away from where I was saying. Okay, you've seen movies like Ready Player One. Well, I can't wait till we have something like that in here where everybody can upload your own avatars, use them anywhere you browse the 3D internet, because that'll be part of our common theme behind the scenes. And then you can actually use it from all the different various sites. That common piece is what I'm building off to the side. This is the basically the tool to create the 3D websites, and it's going to be open source as soon as I finish globalizing all the variables, which is happening at a rapid pace. Should be done within a month. So that's my plans. Make sure you follow me so you know where I'm going to be and when. Okay, so now I have, you know what, I'm going to finish out these real quick, and then I'm going to call it a day on here. Got some other coding I have to finish up. So let's do this real quick. Let's copy that. We have about 5 or 6 more of these, where we're calling dynamic iframes based on the based on what we're calling creating a dynamic iframe, or dynamically creating an iframe, using it and destroying it afterwards, so that we use it as an interface to be able to send things to our database using PHP and a bunch of logic. Keeps the coding simple, and at the same time gets everything we need right where we need it. Okay, so this one does a whole bunch of other stuff here. I want to make sure that we're only getting the stuff we need. We need the user avatar animation ID. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my global variable, my global temp variable, temp ID, value equals okay, set that, and then I put this value right here. And by the way, I only do this on things that we only use at a very sparse way. So basically I'm not trying to tie in temp variables on something and make this happen when it happens and using that there and then throwing something else in that same value. I know where this is in the code, and mentally I'm looking at it going, okay, the only thing I need to do is make sure that it sets it, and then it can call that, and that is logically the next thing that's going to be called in the code. So I'm not using them on anything that has a more dynamic functionality to it, of like using it over and over again. So we're gonna pass what we need to. We're going to handle what we need to in other ways. So this kind of takes care of that. And the other one we have is this user avatar animation. I'm going to create a third variable. Didn't know if we needed one when I first created this, but now that we're there, we're going to create a third temp ID. As simple as that. Now in this load avatars page, I have one more variable I'm going to pass. So by doing this, loading it up from here and then pulling it back from the document object instead of this way, our local variable that we're using here, which is this one, is since the local variable gets destroyed, then it's only relative while it's called here. We're passing it to a document object, a form field, and then we pull it back from here afterwards. So this one can still go. Oh man, I forgot speed ratio. Here we go. There's one more. So we're doing 5 values now, or 4 values. Okay. There are some other form fields I may need to create, or if this ends up being something very repetitive, I may roll this into a actual one called what it needs to be, and then use it as a variable on the document object instead of here. But that's all part of the growth of this product and project. Okay, so we're taking this, copy that, and we put it here, and that's what we have. Okay, so, and how did I miss the most important one yet? Oh wait, this one is being set. It's pulling one of those 2 values, and I can do that same logic here. So we're going to move that code into here, just so that we're doing the same logic. I knew there was a reason I didn't pass that one, because we're pulling it, it's one of two values based on if they're logged in or not. The code allows you to actually have two different avatars right off the default. One is if you do not create a login, then you get a choice of two, a male or female avatars that are kind of looking robotic, and basically you can set the colors and different things, animations and all kinds of stuff that kind of personalize them. Or you can create a login and you get a choice of 10 different avatars currently. And of course we'll add more avatar packs and things like that as a plugin that we can add at a later time. So we'll also release the avatar designs so that you can actually add your own, using our animations, you can actually morph and change and create your own avatars. So there'll be some stuff we'll do for that after we release the open source. That'll be a future endeavor. And so we'll have all these different various parts where you can do the different things, create your own avatars and make it your own. So that's the general gist of what we're working on, what we're doing. Okay, so I'm going to copy that, put that here. I like to repeat code, copy and paste any chance I get, just so that I'm always consistent in the layout and use of code. So we're going to put this in here, roll it into here. It's the avatar frames page. Okay, and that gets rid of the need of this. Now worried about the local variables and how I pull them in. So the first one's here like I did last time. Copy that. There's some other logic of how we pull these variables, so I'm not going to go there with that. And the other ones are user avatar animation and avatar animation. And what you'll notice is that in this last one I did user avatar animation and avatar animation. I want to use those same variables same way, because if something does go awry, certain things are the more consistent you are, the better off you are. And so I am going to do it this way, where it's temp 3, and we're going to set this one here. Like I said, consistency, that's the whole meaning of this whole thing. So we're going to take that, and we're replacing that variable. And we've already set this one manually within that function, so that one's done. And chances are I'm going to revisit this and do it again here. No, this one just has avatar ID. And this whole thing is just pulling back one function, so I'm going to roll the whole thing into it. Copy, it doesn't have any additional values. So indent it properly. Okay, roll this into the function. That, and get rid of these two, because the function itself that I'm calling right here creates those iframes for you, and its avatar is the iframe page we're using for that. And that's another one done. And just 3 more to go. We're passing in a mold name. Mold name has a huge significance in the stuff we're doing. This one, that's for updating other parts of it. We do not need, we're only doing the avatar part in here, so that code can stay outside of it. In fact, I don't see, oh, avatar part, there it is right there. So if I pass in the mold name and let the function happen on that end, I can do it 2 ways. Or I can say, actually, I just need to pass the avatar part in. So I'm going to pass the 2 pieces that we use. I want this iframe to get created and destroyed as fast as possible. So I'm trying to do as much logic as I can beforehand. The other part is by including the logic on the outside of it. If there's any error in the logic, it'll crash before it creates the iframe, which gives me less chance that it's going to have a problem with the iframe, and I'll have to, rely on my garbage cleanup. So I will have garbage cleanup to make sure every once in a while nothing has been lingering, but at the same time I want to be able to run these the best we can, with least likely chance that it's going to have an error when executing its code. So basically, we're saying, grab these values. I don't think I used that anywhere else. So that particular one can go inside here. That's just picking which one of two values to use based on what they have. The other one is the avatar part. I'm going to use a temp field to bring that in. So get temp ID equals, and it'll be this avatar part right here. And you'll see me, I do a lot of copy and paste. The whole reason is because if you do a typo, it could take a little bit of troubleshooting to find. If you copy and paste, it's just one less thing that could possibly error. Okay, so that one's in place. 2 more to go, almost there. Get saved avatar, and excuse me, we're going to get the session. Copy that. Bring it here. And we're going to go with this one goes to avatar, the avatar page, and the only thing it has is an instance ID. Okay, and that takes care of that. Excuse me, sorry. Oh, that was really good. I turned towards my drink, which happens to be towards my microphone too. Yes, if you just joined us, we're building 3D internet, making it open source. We're extending the Babylon game engine, and I've got a number of videos, especially in here, the past ones I've done. I've done one video that's in my library here is a walkthrough of a code and what each thing works like. Another thing is if you look on YouTube, look up WalkTheWeb. On my channel over there, I have a lot of things talking about what WalkTheWeb is. And what it is, in a nutshell, is we have 3D internet is turning actual websites into, turning the whole internet into the world's largest game. I am creating a 3D CMS that lets you host 3D internet and become part of it. And we're doing this release as an open source so that anybody with a web server can become part of the 3D internet. That's what's going to make it 3D internet. Now, what we're actually creating, we have 3 different levels of what we create. We have communities, which are 3D scenes. We have buildings, which are either a physical building, it could be game logic, it could be anything that defines an area within a community. And then we have 3D things, which are stuff like a car, an avatar, a boat, a tree, a table, a chair, a bridge. It could be anything we want. But what these are is, technically, by dividing them into these 3 separate parts, you can take like a chair and drop it into a building or drop it into a community. You can do it multiple times. So I designed one chair as a thing, drop it 4 times around a table. It's all instanced, the whole bit. But by simplifying it into these 3 items, we can have a community where you go to a website, now you're walking around in a community. But the buildings themselves are actually separate websites. So it's like going on the internet. You click a link, it goes out on the internet, it grabs the web page, brings it back to your browser, and then it shows you what it is. Well, I've done that same thing. I create these areas of invisible shapes, like a cube, for example, and I put it around something like a building, where I want this building to be. So you have a city street, and I'm going to put a building right here. What I do is I tell it, put an invisible box called a load zone around it. As your avatar walks into that load zone, it triggers it, just like you clicked a link in browsing, and it triggers it, it goes out on the internet, finds that building definition, brings it back, scrubs the data to make sure you're safe, but then basically uses the shapes to build that building in your scene. Now you have that building. You can have a 3D store, you can have a game, you can have a miniature golf course, you can have a bowling alley with a live game of bowling. And as you walk in that area, it works. When you walk away, the load zone, it takes it away from the scene, the different objects. Now, to take it one step farther, you can even have multiple layers, multiple load zones for a building. For example, I have a scene, and way off in the distance is my building. Well, you don't know it's there, and I don't want to load all the details of what's inside my store when you're that far away. I'm wasting memory usage, right? So I put a couple definable objects that are big and, like the side of the buildings, or something like that, that makes up the big objects to show that there's something over there. Well, when you're far away, it could look like the building. You can even use graphics on it and whatever else we need to do. But then that's what I call an extreme load zone. So when you're in the scene, you go, hey, there's something over there. I want to go check that out. I want to see what that is. So as you're walking closer, you're in this extreme zone. It's already loaded that part of the building. But then as you walk closer, all of a sudden you go into the high load zone, which means I'm at a point where I should start seeing more detail on the outside of my building. Okay, so you hit that. Now all the objects that are part of that high zone render, and they all take its place. So now you're seeing a detailed building with high-end graphics. Then as you walk closer, and let's say I decide I want to walk inside, now you get the basic load zone that is just bigger than the building, so that let's say you're walking on a sidewalk, it might start loading what's inside that store. So you can do, with the high zone, you'd include some window shopping things. So even if you see it at a distance, you go, hey, wait, that's some stuff that I want to check out. I want to get closer. I want to see what it is. So then as you get closer, though, you load up what's inside the store. So now by the time you get there, it hasn't paused. The animation's smooth. You're still walking. You're still moving around. But now there's more stuff inside that store. As you walk closer, you get to walk inside the store. Now you can interact. You can go 3D shopping. You can have game logic that loads up. So you walk on a soccer field. Now you're playing soccer with everybody else. And it's multiplayer. This whole dynamic of what I'm creating is I'm handling the creating of accounts for you in this tool. I'm multiplayer. It's a 3D CMS, so you can actually create, build, and maintain your own without knowing one line of code. Now, if you do know coding, this is where it becomes real powerful. We use the Babylon game engine behind the scenes, so what happens is you can actually extend out any of the Babylon function in what we're creating as plugins. So now somebody can, on their web server, they load up this program, they're part of the 3D internet. Now they're using the same technology, the same standards as everybody else. We go, okay, I'm building a community. Hey, I want that guy's building over there on my street. I can drop it in my scene. Now you get to see everything that we're doing. You get to see that building in your scene. He gets twice, more traffic because he's in my scene and his scene. So it becomes very dynamically created. You can visit my site and yet see his full building if you walk completely up on it. Otherwise, it's just a little, at the distance, hey, there's something over there kind of thing. Okay, so that brings in this whole new dynamic of 3D browsing. There's a number of things I've spoken about today, and I'm going to pull some little clips from it, and I'll put it on the Twitch channel here. Go ahead and follow me so you know when I'm online. I do at minimum a couple hours a day is what I try to do on coding. Mondays at 1:30. I'm going to try 1:30 this time, and I'm actually going to make it where we can do some Q&A, and I can show off some of the stuff that I've tested and tried and it works, and give you a real feel for what it is. But the idea is I want to put in the hands of the developers, just like WordPress did with traditional websites. You can build a plugin that's freemium. You give them something for free to give a taste, and hey, it's functional and everything. But then you can charge, as a developer, you can actually charge premium fees to turn on all this extra functionality. So, for example, one of my favorites is you put a car in there. Well, you get the basic idea of the car. Well, then all of a sudden, you want to be able to have another passenger, another person in this multiplayer game get in the passenger seat of the car. Well, that's an upgrade to the car. They pay a premium fee. It could be a one-time thing to unlock it, or it can be a subscription where they pay it yearly. So anybody on their server can do these functions. Once it's on the server, now people can add it to their sites, into their different scenes that they create that are hosted on that server. So the whole idea is to be dynamic. I'm enabling programmers. I'm saying, I built this interface that's a framework for building 3D websites. You want to compete with 3D shopping? Walmart's out there building a 3D shopping store right now. Well, what would you rather do? Go to one site where you go there and you use exactly what Walmart designed and their programmers designed to do? Or would you like to be able to drop a building, create one shopping store, and then put it on many sites just by telling them, hey, here's the URL, add it to your site. Boom, we're done, we're good. That's how you get a shopping store out there in many communities. That's how you're going to sell your products more than you ever did before. You're going to stand out. You're going to have a 3D building. You're going to look better than every 4 million online stores that are out there on the internet currently in the traditional sense. Okay, so we get these sites, we put them out there. You as a developer are creating plugins. You create the world's best car. Like if you look at the babylonjs.com site, look at some of the examples there. There's a car that looks so freaking awesome. You see the reflection as you drive it. But of course, they're showing the demo on a scene of a couple words on the ground, which is the designer. Shout out to you guys because it's awesome, and I hope everybody's going to go look over there and find this one. But you can drive the car around. Well, can you imagine? He spent all that time on that car, but the scene itself doesn't have anything. So what happens if he takes that same Babylon code, doesn't have to rewrite it, all he has to do is make it available as a plugin. Now you can extend that, drop it into a site, you can actually use that same car in your scenes. Your avatar can own that car, hop inside and drive it around in your scene. Talk about rapid game development. Talk about common elements. Talk about being able to distribute it worldwide system where that car isn't going to just work on somebody that is a coder that is going to try to use that car, or if they go to your site, they'll see your car. Now you distribute it out there all over the world. People are using your car and they know who built it and they're using your upgrades and you're making some money. So the whole idea behind it is to build the 3D CMS, which is this product that hosts 3D websites with a standard across the board that we can have developers creating plugins. We can have people using the 3D CMS to update their own websites, like if you want to change what product's on the shelf, if you want to, do these different things. But then programmers, you guys can create sites for people and get paid to build custom 3D shopping sites for people. You don't have to build it from the ground up. You just have to build the building that they're going to use. You don't have to redesign the world. You don't have to create a website with all this gaming logic and all these designs. You can say, I like this scene I've used before. I'll give you this scene and I'm going to put your new building in this scene. There's your default website. So you can create reusable code, reusable common elements, and use them for any site that you host. Next, you can host the websites for people. You can host them. You can host them and you can make money off of being a host in this. Now we'll have some dynamic things. It's free to use, free to build your sites, free to download. You can get everything you want for it just by download the site and running your own instance of it, okay? Then I'm going to tell you up front, I'm not trying to hide anything. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be hosting, sites for people. If you don't want to host your own, you can do it on my server. You always get my upgrades as I do them, the whole bit. I'll babysit it just like WordPress.com does for their sites. I'm going to do that with my stuff. And then what I'm going to do is, train of thought. Why did I go off on that direction? I shouldn't read while talking. No, chew gum at the same time and I probably trip over my own feet. Okay, so, but the idea is that you can host them and everything. And what I'm going to create for myself is that I'm going to create this multiplayer server that allows it to coordinate your multiplayer on your site. Because even though you're hosting the site, you don't necessarily want to host the traffic that multiplayer use does on your site. And then because of that, that'll include chats between players. That'll include I'll host the general avatar. So let's say I give myself a custom avatar. I load it to the WalkTheWeb site, or actually I can even create it and use it on your site. And then I say, hey, I want this to be my global avatar. I click a button. Now it uploads a copy to my site up on WalkTheWeb. Now every website I go to, if I use my WalkTheWeb login instead of a local login, then I can use that avatar on your site. So it will travel with me everywhere I go. So if I create this awesome avatar that looks like me or represents my personality, and little shout out to Ready Player One movie, if you haven't seen it, definitely, I'm talking that style, then you can have your avatar wherever you go on the 3D internet. Now, to connect up your server, you get the server for free, you get the open source for free, everything's going to be free on that end. You can run that independent, run your own sites without any cost to you at all. I'm going to make sure that stays free. But if you want to use our multiplayer engine and the common things, or even if you want to be able to click a button, now it backs up your server to my server, those kind of functionality, I'm going to do a very modest cost. I'm looking at like $96 a year for a server, for hosting, let's say up to your first 3 websites, or 5. Let's say 5. I'll do it at 5. 5 websites, $96. You can host 5 domain names. That's not 5 websites. That's not 5 scenes. That's 5 domain names. Now, after that, there'll be incremental fees based on how much you're hosting. Because what I'm trying to do is, if you load up an instance, you pay $96, you run all your stuff on it. You can create as many scenes as you like, as many buildings, as many things. You're good to go. What I don't want having is, if you start being a host and you're hosting 30, 40, 50, 100 domain names, I know you're bringing more traffic to me and I need to have something cover my costs. Okay, so we'll have an incremental scale. I'll find out what that's going to be. I'll try to keep it as reasonable as possible, but that's only going after the people that are hosting a lot of websites. I'll make it where you can go to 10 websites for a fraction of the cost. I mean, it's going to be very, very easy to do, and you can host sites for people. You can create sites for your customers. You can host them. You can make your money that way. So you can host them. You can actually also get out there and you can create plugins, load them back to our marketplace. You know, you'll make some money. I'll make some money. We'll get popular. We'll cover the earth with 3D internet. And I'm in it for developers. So, hey, I'm a developer. I've been doing it for over 25 years. I've got a doctorate in education. I've taught programming classes. And I was the webmaster of the largest county in the United States, which happens to be San Bernardino County by physical area. But still, largest county in the United States. I was their webmaster for over 10 years. So benefiting from my experience, making it work globally, making a product that can get out there and we can actually cover the earth and have 3D internet everywhere we go. So, with that rant, rage, and complete adjustment and telling you what we're doing and how and why, and there's a video I did earlier. It's on the server. I labeled it specifically saying, here's a code walkthrough. Make sure you check out that video. It is a 2-hour walkthrough of why I laid things out the way I did, and it tells you more stuff about what I've been talking about in this last little rant here. I break it down. I tell you why. There's logic behind the way I laid things out. I'm making sure it works on all web servers. Anywhere that you put a WordPress website, you can put this copy of this site. It's fairly small, so works well. There we are. That's what I'm doing. So I want to thank every one of you for tuning in to me today. Please follow, because that way you will find me again tomorrow. I'm here most days. On Monday at 1:30, I'm going to try to do a show and tell. I'm going to show you some samples of stuff I've created, just some little demos. I'm going to answer your questions and be a lot more engaged with the chat. So please come back on Monday at 1:30. But otherwise, follow me and jump in anytime. Ask your questions. I'll try to hit them as I go, as long as they don't go too far in depth. And then I will, on Mondays, I'll kind of dedicate that to more of your Q&A and make sure that I'm talking directly to you and answering everything as you do them. Okay, I want to thank you for tuning in, and another good day. So see you again, and remember, it's time to walk the web. So WalkTheWeb.com, check it out. www is, there's a lot of background information in there, so you can see a little bit more about me. You can read about you can see some early tutorials of the admin section in the creation of the 3D CMS. That's all in there in the support section. There's some rudimentary demos. I'm not trying to be the world's best graphics artist. I was trying to get the framework working. I was trying to test out all the components. Now we can totally load Blender objects, so now the graphics have way up in the ceiling. We're doing some really cool animation. We're getting it out there. I'm working to make it run as efficient as possible, and then I'm going to release it open source, and I'm going to take your suggestions of how we can improve it even farther, and it's going to be the developer's tool. So that's the idea. get it out there, and hey, I like Binky in the Brain. What am I gonna do tonight? It's time to conquer the world. No, we're gonna take over the world. Okay, thank you for tuning in today. I will see you again soon, and have a great day.